All right, here we are. We are rocking and rolling. I'm doing this morning because I, again, have the space. And what's interesting, so this question, what's the point? I've just realized it comes up a lot, and I feel like it's telling. There's a really old randos conversation that I love with PVK from pretty early on in this whole phenomenon, Paul Vanderklay, of this guy's name was Luke too. He's from New York, Luke something from New York. I'll try to maybe remember to put it in the show notes afterwards. And he said he learned in church pretty young. He said he learned to pay attention to what people say when they're not paying attention. Because, and this is something psychoanalysts do all the time. Like a good psychoanalyst, basically, the whole goal of a psychoanalyst, I've heard this. I think I've learned this from Peter Rollins, is to get you into to invite you into a space, create a space of hospitality where it's complete non-judgment. You just listen, ask questions, not even pointed questions. Again, point. You just listen and you allow someone to start talking. And through the person's talking, Jordan Peterson talks about this too. Through the person's talking, they heal themselves. They a lot of times will figure out what they even think about things, because that's the whole reason we go to a therapist, is because Romans 7, why do I do the things that I don't want to do, and the things that I want to do, I don't do? Or however he says it, the things that I want to do, I don't do. And the things I don't want to do, I find myself continually doing. Oh, wretched man that I am. That scripture, that passage of scripture from St. Paul in Romans 7. Here's looking at you, Anselman. Why do we go to a therapist? Is that we are not unified. We are not at one in ourselves. We are what I would call divided man, and we do these things that we don't want to do. Our wills are divided. We have different wills. We have angels and demons. We're split into all these different personalities, and there's no unity among those things. There's no integrity among those things. There's not a oneness of mind, heart, soul that acts in accordance with their highest desire and good and highest love. Bring me a higher love. So what's the point? No. So anyhow, that's why you go to a psychoanalyst. That's why you need to figure these things out. Where was I coming back to? And man, not so much having me be a better Christian, but so much more like quote scripture and point it out. Because again, I quote scripture, but it's the bouncing gorilla. Anselman doesn't see the gorilla behind the bouncing ball quoting scripture because I don't say the right things. What's up, Nate?
Nothing much. Do your thing, man.
Okay. All right.
I'll if I have something important to say, I will. But do your normal thing.
All right. So Nate is here watching from inside. So what's the point? I find it to be fascinating. This came up continually in my talks with Sam Tiedemann and Trip Fuller, and when we had that conversation with Paul, with Cassidy about Barbie. That was like Sam and Trip's biggest struggle, I think, with the movie Barbie, is they were just like, it seems muddled. What's the point? Like, what's the director and the author, what are they trying to say? What's going on? And I've just realized, I don't know if this is completely true within postmodernism, but this has always been my understanding of what I would call the honest postmodernists, is they, and what I think is a foul logocentrism, is this idea of like, we always want to figure out what the point is. And if you think about this symbolically, points, masculine, foul logocentrism, what is the utility of this knowledge, of this information? What is this art for? What can it be used for? What do I do with this? It's a very, and I mean this spiritually, masculine energy of trying to use whatever this is, art, knowledge, fill in the blank. What's the point? Is like, how do I use this for some consciously articulable, perceived, and desired end. The problem with that is the problem of the Chinese farmer, and that we often don't know what's good for us. And so a lot of times if your general orientation is to always be looking for the point in everything, which again, I'm not like saying is universally bad, you shouldn't look for the point. But if you are stuck in this place of always searching for the point, I think you're going to be stuck in the space where you don't understand a lot of things from scripture, perhaps like the book of Job, because one could argue that with Jordan Peterson, that's Jordan Peterson's big struggle, is he keeps the why. Why? What's the point? Why? What, what's going on with all this? Why? Like I can't do this. I can't submit to this until I know, which I think is fundamentally actually antithetical to the life of faith. And so I want to read this thing, Nate, and then I'd like to get your thoughts, because I love Terrence Malick. I put it in the show notes. Malick is super Heideggerian, and so I just want to read this article because I love the way that Malick does film, because he's not trying to. There isn't a point. In Malick films, there's not points. There are visions and there are inspirations that are trying to transform your way of apprehending and perceiving the world, maybe quickening your imagination versus giving you an articulable conscious awareness point, which then you can function this utilitarian, theoretically Christian way. So this is from this article that's in the description or whatever. So the director of 4 films, but he's done more than that since, beginning with the Badlands in 1973. Terrence Malick studied philosophy with Stanley Cavell at Harvard before abandoning a doctorate on Heidegger, Kierkegaard, and Wittgenstein. A promising journalist and academic, as well as an outstanding high school football player, in 1969, Malick published what is still the authoritative translation of Heidegger's The Essence of Reasons. That same year, he ended his academic career and enrolled alongside David Lynch and Paul Schrader in the American Film Institute's new conservatory, developed to encourage, quote, film as art, end quote, in America. Although his background had long encouraged commentators to investigate his influences and sources, Malick's films also merit consideration as artistic achievements that confront their audiences with a distinctive experience. Like any great filmmaker, Malick demands that we see in a new way. Unlike most filmmakers, his films are also about the problem of seeing, that is, of perspective. Each of Malick's films presents a conversation or debate between what he suggests is the dominant Western worldview and a competing perspective. Malick follows Heidegger in identifying the Western worldview with the Enlightenment drive to systematize and conquer nature. What's the point? According to this point of view, man demonstrates his significance through technical and scientific mastery. On an individual level, he falls into significance when he fails to win the acclaim of other men. Insignificance, sorry. The competing perspective in Malick's films is the artistic or filmic perspective, of which the paragon example is Malick's camera itself. Malick's goal as a filmmaker is to educate the human eye to see like his camera does. If our habits of vision are characterized by ambition, skepticism, and greed, Malick inspires us with the virtues of patience, appreciation, and awe. He offers not new facts or arguments or points, but persuasive images of the worlds as if filtered through such virtues. Alongside these images, he presents a character in each film who expresses with increasing confidence and dignity the point of view epitomized by the camera. These characters conceive of a power or location they can only gesture toward with words. Quote, sometimes I wish I could fall asleep and be taken off to some magical land, but this never happened, end quote, says Holly in Badlands. Quote, I've seen another world. Sometimes I think it was just my imagination, end quote, says Witt in A Thin Red Line. So I just want to stop there because, I mean, you can feel free to go and read the article, but it's like, and I think this is my big thing in discovering who you truly are and your authenticity or integrity, whatever you want to call it, and why I think you can only have the God of your own understanding, and God's becoming is our becoming, and all these different things, and theosis is realizing Christ in me, filling up what's lacking in Christ's afflictions. The will of God, very God, wills in every place to manifest the mystery of his incarnation, that maximum quote. And in you, in Nate, in everyone that's here. And I don't think you can do that externally from a point through coercion. It has to be this, I don't know. I've been reading this too, Nate, because Chad has wanted me to, and I'm reading it for other reasons, Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's amazing to me through the desperation of alcoholism and these guys who developed this school to the kind of very simple and profound conclusions and practical realities they came to through this book. It boggles my mind. And so, I don't know. I say all that because I've been thinking about, I don't know. And I'll just say this too. When this came up in the last live stream, and this is an area I think where Sherry and I disagree. Teo was saying this, people were saying, and I think Neil commented on some conversation with Chad too about that, where he's probably more in my understanding. I don't care. I actually enjoy, I don't enjoy or not enjoy the navel gazing and the self-analysis and the inward kind of looking of this little corner, because in a way that's just part of the journey. That's part of your journey as a person. That's part of our journey as a community. So what does it mean? What is this little corner doing? What are we trying to do? What are these? Kezi spoke about this really great with Gavin the other day. What is this thing doing? It's about creating a space, I think, where people can maybe discover what they actually think about the world and change the way they apprehend the world.
It's about creating a spirit community.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Well, elaborate.
So the whole time you were talking, I couldn't. Do you know the live song Operation Spirit?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's not my name.
Okay. So, I can remember when I first heard that song, I'd come back late from playing D&D. This is it was a weekend, and I was visiting my grandparents. I was visiting from college, and I had gone to play D&D with some of my high school friends. And I was up late at night, and I was sleeping on the couch because I didn't want to wake up my grandparents. So I just kind of crashed on the couch when I got home, and
that wonderful grandfather.
But I kind of had MTV on, and because this is before the internet, and this is when MTV still played music videos.
Yeah.
And I bolted up as soon as that song came on, and it was immediately grabbed my attention. And the lead singer of Live, eventually he became a Christian and ended up starting doing Christian music. But this was they were kind of into Eastern religion at the time when they recorded this album.
What album was it?
It's self-titled, or actually no, Mental Jewelry. Mental Jewelry was the album.
Okay.
And there's a refrain in the song. Did you let it go? Did you let it go? Did you let it go, my friend? Let's get it back. Let's get it back together. That's that's what we're doing, and it's called Operation Spirit. So that's what a spirit community. That's how a spirit community is built. It has to be built with this kind of cooperation and dialogue.
Right, and if everybody's always looking for what's the point, and then we have differing points. You're constantly going to be
that's how you establish that's how you establish hierarchies, by saying by demonstrating this is the right vision, this is the point, everybody get behind me, let's go.
Well, or maybe emanating conscious egoic hierarchies, because hierarchy is going to happen regardless, right?
Depends on what you mean. Pajot is really evasive on hierarchy, because he kind of talks about the way he talks about hierarchy. Sometimes he seems to have a traditional understanding of hierarchy, but then other times he's a little bit more nuanced when he talks about hierarchy. And ultimately, I think I've heard him say on multiple occasions that he links hierarchy to the idea of procession. So so there is, but the thing is that the hierarchy is not a horizontal hierarchy. like human beings. Okay, human beings, as human beings, we're on the same ontic level, right?
Okay.
So we're on the same horizontal plane. So to have a hierarchy within that same plane is not appropriate, because we're all on the same, we're in the same level of being. As a human being, no human being has any claim to superiority over another,
Well, this is going to get into probably
because
you.
we exist on the same level of that ontic hierarchy. Now I would say this: but here's the thing: saints actually kind of leveled up. They actually are on another level of being from us. So in a way, like, saints are legitimately operating at another level of the ontic hierarchy than we are.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, it's like, but we always are looking at the horizontal for our marching orders. Like, we just, like, whoever demonstrates themselves on the plane of horizontal evolution, where survival of the fittest is the rule. Like, we look for whoever is winning at that game, and that's who we want to follow. Right, and that's why our hierarchies are always power hierarchies and always corrupt. And that's why as above, so below is never any more than an aspiration in the fallen world, and can only be true in the actual creation, which is the world that God intends, which is coming into being through Christ.
Yeah.
And those who actually connect to Christ are operating at a different mode of being, at a different level of the ontic hierarchy, because they're actually participating in the procession of the Spirit.
Right, and they have different. I don't know. It's like they live in an alternate reality in a sense to often people, and like why the wisdom of the world is foolishness to those who are perishing. Another Bible verse.
Another thing that Peugeot said that I entirely agree with is that in a way, like, the saints are already living from the eschaton.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, in the eternity of now. But I guess this is
because that's the thing. It's like that's the thing about parousia, is that the parousia is, yes, it's a meta-historical. It is a meta-historical ultimate event, yes, but it's not only that. It's also manifold, which is why Christ can say that that some will not die before they see him coming again, because the parousia is in fact experienced by the saints.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's outside of our linear experience of time, or
they don't live in the same world.
Yeah. Right. Well, and not to so part of, I wanted to go back to the hierarchy thing, and maybe we've moved past that, but like this is this sentence of Malick follows Heidegger in identifying the Western worldview with the Enlightenment drive to systematize and conquer nature. I guess that's my idea. Like, if that's what I meant by an egoic, merely emanating hierarchy, because you're trying to impose your will, your egoic conscious will, on it systematically on nature. Like that drive is what I'm always opposed to when I say all institutions are inherently demonic. Like, if you're trying to establish hierarchies based on your will and what you think should happen according to what you think the point is, the problem is that which essentially is like a form of utopianism, which I think he talks about later in here, where it came up somewhere, is like no, it was in here. Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm reading the chapter right now on how it works, and it's so good. Part of me wants to just read part of this. Is this okay?
Go for it, man.
So this is like, it's laying out the steps, right? So it has the 12 steps, and then it says, so like, what do we mean? So it says, just what do we do? The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Again, intentions. I don't judge people's intentions. It doesn't matter to me. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, this show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. Protestant work ethic, just try harder, you know. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Couple more. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia, which many of us have never attempted. Though our delusion was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom. We had to now get down to the cause and conditions. Oh, never mind. I skipped the wrong page. Sorry, go back. That didn't make any sense. All would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safe cracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, our self-pity? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some point in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. This is everything. Like I see this in myself. I see this in conflicts with my wife. This is like James chapter 4. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Is it not this? You want and don't have, so you fight and quarrel. It's all about what's the point, and it's for a perceived good, right? The devil just tricks you by this is what counterfeit is, right? He deceives you with the good. You think you're doing the good, but it's actually the bad. And it's really rooted in this selfishness, this self-centeredness that then comes out in resentment, bitterness, self-pity. Like if these other people would just do, God, if this would just happen, then it would be okay. But maybe all that stuff doesn't need to change. Maybe like the way that we are like the saint. Maybe we need to live in an alternate reality and see the world differently.
But it's not it's the true reality. It's the real.
Yeah, no, I agree. But this is where
what the saint sees is the real.
Well,
it's right. The rest of us that are living in the delusion.
Well, the reason why I jumped in, I was thinking this before you picked up your big book that you were just getting ready to read from, and so 12-step program. A lot of what you're talking about, this is there's a famous guy named Chuck C, and he gave a whole bunch. He has a book. It's called A New Pair of Glasses, right? And that's talking about it's changing the way you see yourself, you see the world, you see you're connected with others, and so on and so forth. And the thing that 12-step programs have as their advantage is it's a spiritual program of action, right? And when it gets into how it works, and this is the the last chapter before you get into the how it works was the steps and stuff like that. It's a chapter to the agnostics, which is basically a call of just, hey, open your mind, okay? Like, just set aside everything that's happened, no matter who you are. Or even if you're overly religious but can't stay sober, how about you just start opening your mind? And at the very last sentence is, when we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. And there's wonderful thing in that how it works is said, some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely.
Yeah.
And you enter into a spiritual program of action. And so when you mentioned, Nate, the saints have kind of figured this out. Well, what do the saints figure out? And this is this Evagrius Ponticus, which is praxis leads to gnosis. It's the practice. So in practicing the gospel virtues and practicing ascetical things and gospel virtues would be things like reconciliation with brother, which are part of the steps, amends, right? So gospel virtues would be forgiveness. Where do you get to that point to where you don't hate you have love for your enemy, which is all, but you go through all these things, and it includes things like fasting and prayer and something like the Jesus prayer, this meditative state that you're not going to get in a 12-step program. And I would just say the thing that we're trying to, I'm getting ready to potentially do a talk with Nick Freerillian on here. I had some thoughts around Paul's talking about this. And I think one of the big things that I see failing, and again, I've not joined the Orthodox Church yet. And I spent 50 years trying to be in Protestantism, and I was seeing this collapse, and it's not producing disciples or this sort of thing on a mass scale, right? And it really comes down to you have to act your way into a right way of thinking. You don't think your way into a right way of acting. That's that program of action, the spiritual program of action. And a lot of you get this wisdom that was pulled out that you saw. I believe that book you're reading over there, Luke, was divinely inspired. But there's no hierarchy. There's no president. Like, everyone has this same level, right? We're all just members coming together. Now, there are some loose organizational things, but they made sure money didn't get involved with the people. They made sure nobody was going to become the president or say this, that, or the other thing, right? Because it needed to be that. But how the hierarchies get built, and I think you were talking about this, Nate, like the hierarchy gets built within the group. We call them old timers, right? So sages, elders, these people that have proven it over a long period of life.
Within the group, it's like it's personal, not systematic, not applied to everyone.
It's earned, and it's earned.
It's also real, Lance. It's also real. It's not like made up. It's not like you were just here because someone appointed you to this position of authority. It's like, oh, I see something in you. You're at a level that I am trying to get to. Therefore you have authority from my perspective, and I'm the authority. I give you the authority because I recognize it in you. Yeah. So it's not like you don't have it. Like it's actually it's a reciprocal authority, right? Because the authority of that elder comes from my recognition of the fact that they know something I don't know.
Well, that's
so I willingly submit to that authority because of that reciprocity.
Totally. That's the difference between power and authority. Authority is reciprocal.
Yeah.
But
and the whole key, you'll see these things, you'll see the keys to the program, to people in those things. Willingness. Are you willing?
Right.
Are you willing to do something different? Are you willing to do that which you don't want to do? Are you willing? Are you willing? Because you don't even have to believe these things you start doing, but you just have to be willing to start doing certain things. And if you will just be willing, it's amazing that willing people that start practicing spiritual found principles in their lives all of a sudden find themselves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later with this totally new view on the world, Luke. How they see things is transformed.
Yeah, totally.
It has nothing to do with propositions or anything to do with those sorts of things.
Yeah. So I want to read one more paragraph from And so Tim, the Marylander, said, how long till people start using this like the Bible, which they do. So I'm going to read from chapter 5, verses approximately 1 through 10 or something, and everyone needs to submit to it. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. This is what you're saying. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. That's it. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest, which is, I don't know, honesty to me has always been so key. It came up recently. Somebody brought it up, but it's the Brothers K. Zosima story about the, like, above all, do not lie, especially to yourself. And then Peterson says, because if you lie to yourself, you poison your own organ for perceiving truth. Right. Because you're lying to yourself. And this is why the God of your own understanding is so important. Because, like, if somebody else just keeps telling you, this is God, this is the God you need to submit to, these are the formulas you need to submit to. But if you don't want to, if you don't have this reciprocal honesty where you believe that, you can't do it. You're lying.
You destroy your capacity for discernment. Like, discernment becomes impossible.
Okay. Tim, I love you, but, like, what do you mean? Pretty narrow and judgmental. What is?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell when what the comments are about sometimes. So maybe
he might have been commenting to someone in the.
Those words apply to all humans, past, present, and future.
Oh, I would say so. Okay, this is actually, I'm glad you said that. Okay, yes. So this is like one of the reasons that I was on the Estuary thing early is that I saw early on its potential to kind of be something like AA that was accessible to everyone, that didn't need to have like you didn't need to have an identity as an alcoholic or whatever, because everybody needs this, because like everyone's got some kind of idol in their life. Everyone. And everyone is a sinner, and everyone is messed up, and these principles are important for everyone. And being a part of a spirit community, which I think AA is important for everyone. And I think I think TLC is trying to do this. It's hard to do this without being in embodied physical space, but I think TLC does the best job it can of trying to create a spirit community in a virtual space. But I mean, it's so, yeah, I think that's so, yeah, I would just, my answer to the Marylander on that would just be, yeah, everybody.
Well, and I think it's because everyone is, I don't know, that's the way I conceive of everyone, Tim, is that we at least right now in this period of transformation, this period that we find ourselves in of becoming, or in between this imperfect state to the perfect state or whatever, it's like true and false self. You are half a liar, or not half, I mean, but like part of you is a liar and part of you is a truth teller and a truth seeker. It's the angel on one shoulder, the liar, the demon on the other shoulder, and you are moving. I mean, that's just the way that I conceive of reality. The church is what is called out of non-being into being, which is also the cosmos. Like, all those differentiations collapse, and you are either living into being and truth, or you are living into non-being and lies. But the good news as a Christian universalist is I think Christ has even triumphed over non-being and lies. And Christ plays in all places. So it's unescapable at the end. It's just, I don't know. The one journey is the Christ-like journey of self-sacrifice, which sucks, and you suffer and die, and everyone betrays you. But the other one is where you suffer and die, and you betray yourself. So, I mean, whatever. What kinds of betrayal do you want? Self-betrayal or everyone else, or like integrity and the betrayal of everyone else who doesn't want to live into that kind of true reality?
Nate, you'd mentioned something about Estuary, and so a lot of people. So first, I heard this through church people. Church says, "Well, we would like to do something that looks more like AA because it seems like they have a much higher percentage of producing transformed people who are living it, right?" So one of the things Chuck C, like I love one of his quotes that he said, oh, where is this? If you ask me what is your religion, I would say it's the way I live. You know, which is, yeah, wow, right? And I also think that's to be fair to any denomination, Protestant, Orthodoxy. If you would ask anyone, that's the answer you would get. Like I would have said that as an evangelical, right? I mean, that's not, but that's kind of the key. Here's the difficult thing. So here's the solve. As I have looked at this for years, here's the problem. Is that at AA there's a primary purpose, and Chad picks this up, and the primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So that's the thing that binds us, right? And people live and die over this stuff. So that's this thing. But the difficult things comes is also people are so desperate that they're willing to let go of their old ideas, right? There's a desperation in it that forces you to have to literally die to self. Like you've learned, this has got to change. And it's the people who become successful. How would you be willing to let go of all your old ideas and do something completely different? There's this desperation that's there that gets people into action. The other piece that's difficult is, and I've thought about this in Estuary, and I've thought about this. We talk about the elders and the old timers or whatever. Or you can do it pretty early, and this started when it was early on, but where are the sponsors, the people that have lived it, that can actually be that person who can take you down the way and show you the way? Like within Estuary, it's hard to produce a large number of sponsors or disciples or elders or whatever. I mean, that to me becomes the difficult rubber in the road, and I don't know how that plays out in Estuary. Because even though, here's the deal, AA is not church and Estuary is not church. AA is quick to point to, it's like, hey, go to church if that helps you. It's pointing to church things, but it realizes it's not church. And Estuary is not church either. It's value. I think it's going to be extremely valuable in our society coming forward, but it's not church.
What makes it not church, though, is the interesting question. Because to me, like, the thing that makes it not church to me is that it doesn't have the Eucharist.
Yeah, there's no sacraments.
There's no sacraments. Like to me, like, which I don't know. I mean, it's like, I think that Estuary could, like, for people like who aren't part of a sacramental tradition, it's like if they're getting more out of Estuary than they are out of their non-sacramental church. Could Estuary replace a church like that? Yeah, I think it could. If I'm being honest,
you could be hierarchies, and I will say this, and this will work just fine. There's better and there's best, right? There are absolutely people within programs that would say that's their church, right? And by the way, totally fine, right? But it's not because of those reasons, right? And so I just think it's hierarchy. Like there's this helpful group that helps you get in a spiritual program of action. That's great. But church is this totally different thing. And to me, there is a hierarchy of it, right? And someone in here mentioned, what if someone what if they've got their own understanding as a golden calf?
But Lance, it's important to point out that we're
second, guys.
Go for it, Chad.
Like, so if you want to try to like map how is Estuary or what we're doing here related to AA, or like how does it mirror? You have to actually, the best way I've been able to understand this is to know the actual history of how AA came about, how the book came about, where sponsorship came from, where those words came from, and it all starts. So right now, let's say the last 5 years before Estuary, when there's just like Paul doing these videos and then meeting Jonathan and John, like that's the kind of like when Bill Wilson meets Dr. Silkworth, and then also meets Dr. Silkworth gave us language about the allergy and all this stuff. Anyways, so right now we're in the stages where in the AA history, where Bill meets Dr. Bob, and then they start carrying the message to one guy at a time, and then those guys start carrying it to one guy at a time. There was no book, there were no steps, there was no hard way of doing it, and that's kind of where the first 5 years, I think, of the Little Corner came from. And then Estuary comes, and that's where these more guys start meeting actually in person. And so it's kind of like the meetings kind of came first, but they didn't have any steps. They had a general idea that they were passing around to each other. What started happening is that started to get conflated and really watered down. So that's why they decided, for two reasons, they wrote the book for two reasons. One reason was, holy shit, this is actually working. The second is, we need to actually get this message out there so before it gets completely watered down. And then they did that, and then they self-published the book. So in my mind, the next logical kind of step is somebody needs to actually, if they would like this to be something that can map onto helping people grow out of their idols, let's say, then you're going to need to have some sort of practices that are kind of codified, but not rules, rather they are suggestions. And then, so that's kind of where it would have to go next. Maybe we've done that. Maybe that's all what, like, maybe this little-corner.com is. That's a place of codification, right? Because you can look up what it is you want exactly. And in that tool, you can kind of look at all the canon. And
that's why, Chad, when you brought up early on in Estuary, so Chad keeps using this word traditions. In AA, there are these traditions, right? And so for me, Estuary and a 12-step meeting, those are actually pretty good. Like they're not church, but those could be very closely aligned. Like they're actually, those things could operate similarly. It's not church,
right?
And so, as we're starting to grow this thing, Estuary, unlike a church, I think really can look at AA as a model. And so ultimately, right, like there are these, so when Chad, like this is where you're talking about, which is, there are these protocols that are getting kicked around. You asked the question in a live stream the other day, how does sponsorship look like? Because that's a piece that you would need to figure out in this Estuary model. But also it's why, let me finish. It's also why you keep calling them to say, hey guys, as we're starting to think about this thing, and maybe it's too early, you were kind of an early adopter, you understand there needs to be this concept of traditions that you build around Estuary, because that's that wisdom step in AA that protects Estuary from itself.
Well, that's all true, but like the thing is like the traditions didn't come until like 10 years later, and they actually can't come first. So, and Paul has kind of said this, he said, you don't want to actually kind of codify anything as long as you possibly can. So you want to wait until you can get to a certain point where you can do that, because then actually once the body starts to find its feet and settle.
Absolutely. Right. But for people who are planning though, Chad, it's a good idea to see the map. So when you understand, so if I'm an Estuary guy, I'd want to know what made 12-step, what Luke started even talking about, like giving people a new perspective, like all these things, like programs of action, everything else. Mm-hmm. It's important to see these things that actually made 12-step programs work, and then say, okay, we're not there yet, but guys, here are some pitfalls and some of the reasons the traditions came up because they had stepped in it during that time frame, right, Chad? So they are useful, and so it's just kind of getting an idea around, like, so I would say this thing would be this. If this thing gets a money center around it and certain people have control of the money, it will fail.
Well, just hang on a second. So I have to go really soon. I have to go in like literally 2 seconds. So just real quick, the whole thing about the AA versus church thing, right in the AA literature, it says we are not a religious body. However, we do want to encourage you to go to your churches, because there you may even start to bring a new life to that church. So be quick to see where religious people are right and make use of what they have to offer. That's the kind of thing that they talk about. So we're like, and all I'm trying to lay out here is, um, none of this stuff can actually be mapped on before you actually start to trip into different traps. So that's where we're at right now. We're in the stages of figuring out where we are. If and when it does go somewhere a scale higher, like that will all be a result of our own experience. It will not be something that you can theorize and then place on. And it probably won't be something that's outside of the DNA that already exists. So everything's going to come out of our own experience. That's the way it will have to be. It cannot be this top-down deal. It has to be like, oh, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. And those things will actually be written into whatever happens here. So I got to go, guys. Thank you.
Peace out, Chad.
And to bring this around to what you were talking about, Luke, what you started it, but what you and Nate were talking about and everything else is, it's highly personal, right? It's like you say, it's the group is coming together. There's this thing. The goal is to put on a new pair of glasses, like Malick challenged you to just see things in a different way, perceive things. He's not giving you a point or a proposition. And I think
Hey, Lance, could we possibly talk later? Because for some reason they decided to put the anarchist in an influential position in Estuary on a larger scale. I don't know. So
That's the right move.
and I would love to pick your brain because it sounds like you have like a lot of really solid thinking. So if we could just send me an email. And let's arrange a time to talk, because I would like to talk. I'm not necessarily even recording anything. Just like for us to just have a video conference together and like just pick your brain, because you have a lot of great insight, I think, to this, and that could help guide us to not make some mistakes as we build this thing.
Well, that's because the true anarchist won't allow other people to impose the God of their understanding onto everyone else and then systematize it and force everyone to agree with them.
I think one of the things that, to use a Luke term, with the thing beneath the thing for AA programs / therapy, working a program, to go all the way back to what Luke's, I guess, was reading about, is a practice of radical truth-telling about yourself and about your situation.
What makes it radical? Like if you jump in and say your sound is still too quiet, man? That radical truth-telling?
No, I'm talking about things that you're ashamed of.
Are you ashamed of your quiet mic?
Is it quiet?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the point you're making is legitimate. Grim is just
trolling me.
No. Yeah. What do you mean by radical? I use the lightsaber.
Okay, like what do I mean by radical is, admitting to yourself that you have a real problem and identifying that problem specifically. And taking responsibility for the fallout of whatever that problem's created in your life or in other people's life. That's not easy to do for a person that's trapped in addictive patterns. That's the pattern to get out of it, is to be honest about it.
Forgiveness, not blaming, like that section I read. The circumstance that you're in, you're not always saying, oh, it's everyone else's fault. You're actually taking the log out of your eye with humility, forgiving other people for their trespasses as the same thing, as your Heavenly Father forgives you. That's the hard work of Christianity that most people just don't actually want to do, myself included.
Yeah, and it's a work. And I think that's the thing that scares the good Protestants, is that it is an actual thing that you have to do in this world. We can pray about it all day long between you and God. Usually doesn't do anything. You have to deal with it in the tangible nature of reality for it to cause the change. And that's why AA programs, certain ways of doing therapy for certain people, can help create changes. And those are spaces. We talk about Estuary. Estuary is this kind of space. TLC is this kind of space. In a certain way, creating certain kind of spaces that allow for that practice to be practiced. And in general, church doesn't allow for that practice it doesn't have a formula for it. It says do it, but it doesn't really have like a formula.
I think the
Well,
formula happens in discipleship is that. So I would just put a different word out there instead of radical. The term the 12-step program uses is rigorous honesty. That's like the bedrock of one of the programs. And rigorous is constantly working, complete, exhaustive, like half measures don't avail you nothing. Is the terminology used there. It's like, okay, you got to get rid of all the bullshit, which like Luke would say is like, you got to, that gets back to your whole lying thing.
But Lance, I think let's be honest here, and this I not to let Luke do too many victory laps, but a big barrier to churches doing this is confessionality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right, that was a joke.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, so for example, like a Sam, if he shows up at a church and he wants to be rigorously honest or radically honest, he has to come in and tell people he's not a Trinitarian, and then he's going to get excommunicated.
Yeah.
That's the point you're making about professionalism, right, Nate?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it automatically limits what can be said in these conversations if you have them in a church environment. Because people are afraid of saying something that's outside of the professional boundaries.
To excommunicate? That's ridiculous.
Well,
that shouldn't happen. I just wanted to
I'm with you on that one. Yeah. Yep. What are Protestants? How are Protestants talking about heresy or excommunication? Totally with you.
As a captain of a channel in the flotilla, specifically within the boundary of that LARP, I love how Chad just said we use the growth pattern of AA to see how we're floating. There's something about anyway, as in that role, I'm talking to Pastor Paul this afternoon for about 30 minutes. And so while you guys are live and thinking about TLC and AA and growth and points and whatnot, I'm watching. I'm going to have that conversation later, and I'm watching from the crowd. So Lance has been like a foundational pillar of the fact my boat still floats, and was majorly supportive for the first years. And then so he's, however he sees this thing is going to be a key perspective for everybody. So Lance, I'd like to hear that from you. And just because of you guys have been here for so long, we've all been stringing our boats together in the sea of information, these many late moons now, and Baxter's pulling up a new boat. So from that perspective, can you kick it around for a little bit? Because I have that conversation coming.
All right, Graham. It's good to see you, man. Love you. That guy. I love that guy. Well, I am also going to hop off, gentlemen, because I got to actually go log into my work computer, unfortunately. So, but it's nice that you start, when you start early like this, I can hop on at least for a bit. So, I'll continue listening
All right.
while I'm working.
Cool.
All right. Yep.
Thanks, Nate.
You bet.
Yeah, this is a somebody said earlier, I don't know, and we can talk about this too. This Wes Curry. Is this the Wes Curry that came on the show for a while? This guy is fantastic. I mean, we are all caps. All caps are a little bit of a red flag. Just letting you know, Wes. I use a lot of all caps, but it's a red flag. Just so everyone knows. It's dangerous. So someone said earlier, is there a right here. So Tim, is there a desire to intentionally grow TLC, which I would say again is like in a pointed, systematic way rather than let it grow organically? Yeah. I mean, that's been an ongoing debate among TLC people for a long time. How much structure? When do you? How much structure do you impose?
I mean, I could tell you that even in this last 2 minutes, I could just feel not the literal hierarchy of this. Wasn't just hey, let's have a general conversation. it's like, hey, I've been doing this for 3 years or 2 years, and this guy was in here for a really long time, and I'm just kind of like, I don't belong on this screen right now. And of course, he was gracious enough to say, yeah, Christians, but that's just a reality. I mean, you can't pretend like time doesn't do something.
Well, it does. I mean, it's, PBK said that recently in a video. Like, I've just been around and continued to be involved for a very long time, so that signifies something. But that doesn't mean there aren't people that come in that rise up. It just becomes harder. Like Sam, people talk about Sam being an OG. Sam Tiedemann is not really an OG. Like, he was pretty late to the game, but he's still a monster. So he just rose in everyone's salience. I mean, that just happens. Gavin was like booted from BOM and had all these issues and stuff, and now he's popping back up. I mean, he's resurrected. He's coming back from the dead and bringing the heat. Oh, we can't hear you, Gavin. I don't know what that is.
Sounded like a gremlin.
Yeah,
this is a struggle, Tayo. What, Lance?
Yeah, so the organically question, which is, this is this tension you see going on here right now. Some people are mad at Paul because he's not leading and organizing and getting all this stuff. I see what Paul is doing, like any great pastor is he there's some direction. He's very clear what he's telling you he's trying to do. He's together with John Van Donk and he's working on Estuary and he's seeing how that's going to go. He's also seeing that other people are going to do all sorts of things, and like any good head pastor, he's going to say, oh yeah, go do that ministry. And he's going to watch it and he'll put some shine on it. And if he can help, he'll help. And if it gets a lot of traction, he'll be, wow, great. That's awesome sort of thing. But there's this tension between building. It is growing organically. And there are going to be things that start working, and there's going to be some practical ways of coming together. And like Chad said, it's almost premature to put that around it. And then what I've seen being involved with church groups or other sorts of things, you can also see there's some things that happen in the 12-step programs is there are certain things that will kill it for sure. Money, you got money, and people who have control of money. Gatekeeping, certain people that get to be the gatekeepers. Those sorts of things, trying to remove some of that structure and stuff. You have to have enough structure, or so it doesn't just tear itself apart, but it needs to do it. So it's growing, and I see it is growing organically. And I think some people are frustrated because they want to speed that up. But like what Chad just said earlier, these things have to take time. And I will say, like, this question I would have for you, Luke, when you hear, I know how you are, like, when you hear things or you see Paul wanting to do Estuary or something, and I know how you just kind of recoil from organization, structures, things, like when you hear that, does that just make your skin crawl? Or do you see like, hey, this might be a thing that turns into a loose collection of people that provides a focal point where people can come in and start practicing these new ways of seeing and stuff and so on and so forth?
No, I think it's I mean, I probably come across as really extreme in that, but I'm just part of that's just my temperament, and part of that is my natural contrarian, equilibrating kind of personality. Is if everybody seems to be going this way, I just go the other way, just kind of automatically. And so people that want to, and it has to do with a lot of the point, and like the Chinese farmer thing is, the people that are more inclined to highly ordering and structuring things. This is kind of like what I was trying to get at in that video about a message to religious and irreligious conservatives, is if you really if you want to point and structure and you want to really impose that on something, the thing that doesn't, this is why I'm an anti-interventionist, is the problem with that is like, you don't know what's going to happen. Your unintended side effects to your fix to any solution, you're not aware of what you don't see in that. You're harvesting the fringe in your imposing structure maybe too early. And the problem is that your intended Christ, the point that you want to make, may turn out to be Antichrist. And so you have to create a space that allows for a a healthy relation between order and chaos, but I think all bodies are that way. I'm not opposed to structure and perimeters and boundaries and heresies. I've been trying to work through some of that stuff myself. But what does all that stuff mean? Because it's like, what does it mean to actually be heretical? And especially when you have this Enlightenment Western systematic propositional mode of understanding heresy. Like, I just think that's fundamentally wrong, because what you're going to do is you're going to, I think a lot of times in your good intentions, you're going to exclude your very salvation.
I think, Luke, what I've experienced in this month is to go back to my term, you used, and I think Lance said rigorous versus radical truth. What is the radical truth telling that takes place in this space? It's not like maybe the personal or the political, but like what's unique about this is the radical nature in which people feel like they can be honest about spirituality. Like, and I think that's really, this isn't about addiction. This isn't about, like, the pattern that I see is like, hey, we have Jewish people. Let's honor people that are seeking, like the kind of seeker kind of thing. And it's like, you can come in here, but then there's no judgment no matter where you land out and you go to church. It's like, well, that's where we want you regardless. And
yeah.
But you know, I know a guy in town that's been flirting with orthodoxy, and I think he feels probably kind of like, I don't know, you know, and I'm like, just talk to me about it. I don't care. Like, I think it's cool. I'm probably not going to end up there, but like, that's the spirit that I see here, is like a place to feel okay. And those places are hard to find in the real world sometimes.
This is a safe place to be a seeker, right? And what I mean by that is, if you want to ask the hard questions that might get you kicked out of a certain church, or you want to have certain conversations, this is the place where you can ask the hard questions. You know, like, you can come in here and, man, you can get tested by someone like Jacob, who's really going to test certain Christian beliefs that you might have, you know, and which is, you know, a good thing. But this is, and one of the old timers in 12-step group I'm in, you know, she had talked about really what we are is we're God's, we're who are the winners or losers, you know, those whatever, but the winners are the ones that are seeking God in this program. So she had, after 50 years of sobriety, had simplified it down to people that are the winners, i.e. being transformed, living the lives they want to live, are the people who are seeking God. And I think in many ways, whether people realize it or not, and I think, you know, Gavin can be here, I think these are people that they're seeking. And I think even if they don't know it, Luke, I think people are coming here because they're seeking God.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's
the power. That's the power of your thesis on the non-confessionality of a space. And maybe instead of trying
I think it's
to map
essential.
that onto a church.
I think that's essential, because I think the reason, what's the probably the most common thread of everyone who's in this community, is that I didn't have a space where I could talk about these things with other people. So no one had whatever this is in their life, or that people keep coming back here for that. They find that value here. And then my question is, why didn't you have this in any other realm of your life? Why don't you have another place where you can go and say what you really think? Because if you say what you really think, people are going to exclude you from their community, and they're going to ban you, and they're going to kick you out. That's called confessionalism.
Well, it's
That's what
also
it's called.
There's also seems to be some unsaid rules, because I think generally, from my experiences, that politics stays out of this corner too.
Yeah.
And that creates a telos that helps keep people going in a certain direction. That's
largely, except the written, the predominantly written forms. Like, if you go in the BOM, and you go to the heavy writing places of it versus the live chats and stuff back in the day, those would always skew
devolve.
political.
Yeah.
Which is
like
interesting.
Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, people.
There you go.
What up, brother?
Go ahead, Tayo.
No, I was just checking if you were still a robot or not, but you sound good now.
Nice.
Got himself fixed.
Oh, no. That I did that to a dog once. I think Grimgriz asked Lance a question earlier, and it was like, Lance, do you remember the question and have an answer for it? Oh, now I can't hear Lance.
Are you talking about Grim Grizz?
I was going to go back and listen to it. I got distracted with something and I didn't
Yeah,
have the whole thing. And he was asking a very serious question. So I need to go back and listen to that, and I will absolutely comment on it.
Cool.
Okay, what is this? Grim is skewing
You-
political. Sorry, did someone?
Do you remember what it was, Gavin? Just the spirit of it?
Well, what I caught is that he's got a conversation with PVK, and that Lance, you have been a big reason why he feels he's still around. And I wanted to say that what I wanted to say earlier is I feel like Grimgriz and Jacob are a big reason why I'm still around. And then so your perspective is valuable. Now I don't know exactly what he wants you to weigh in on, but that's what I caught.
There you go. Well, I appreciated that. And yeah, I'll go back and listen to it, and certainly.
It's cool how we can support each other. Like that in itself is pretty nice that we can be supportive. It only takes one other person connecting with one other person, and it ends up giving you a reason to stick around. Right.
Well, Grim is the reason why I came into this little corner. I did not come into this little corner through Jordan Peterson. I was searching for sermons. I'm a sermon guy. That's where I was at. And a sermon of Paul's came up because it was on Daniel or something. I don't know. And it came up. And so I watched this sermon. I thought he's an interesting guy. Then the algorithm fed me his first conversation with Grim Grizz. And I just loved it. And I loved it because first I thought Grim was amazing. And here's this guy being really honest and authentic and stuff. And what I was really impressed by was a pastor in a CRCNA church is having a conversation with a guy. A lot of pastors might want to have a public conversation with something like that. And I was like, I had mad respect for PVK, and I really like Grim. I'm like, where are these people at? Because I think Grim's amazing, right? So then I found my way into the Bridges of Meaning through a YouTube connection, and then Luke and Sherry basically called me an asshole, evangelical asshole, in a voice chat, and it changed my life.
That's one way to say it.
Is that fair though, Luke? I mean, that kind of captures the spirit.
I mean, I was trying to do the opposite of that. That's funny how that's where it came from.
That's funny that you did not intend for it to be heard that way, but somehow.
Oh man, what's funny is I had a triggered response to what Lance's general thing, but I was in a place of what I consider to be growth and maturity, and so I just asked him a question, and genuinely not even a leading question. It was just what's your story?
I was giving a preacher answer. I was giving a preacher answer to penal substitutionary atonement.
Yeah. Which is always and that's part of why I like even the diversity that's in here and all the weird language and the inventing new words and things and what the lightsaber of what do you mean by that is because it makes you can't just, I know this from classical education, pull parrot. You can't just regurgitate the classic Sunday school answer because there's not universally common vernacular that everybody can just resort to and flip to instantly. Jesus, or this is why I love T. Grogan in here, as a physicalist, but he's asking things that are a problem. He asked some question earlier, which I wanted to go into, but I'm just using it as an example. He said, what's the difference between how do you distinguish reality from imagination? I don't. So but my understanding of imagination is rooted in George MacDonald, which you have no familiarity with. So if you want to know what I mean by imagination, I assume you mean imagination as this merely emergent, nominalistic, non-real hallucination, right? It's just this unreal thing.
I'd love to talk to T. Grogan.
Yeah, that's not what
because
I'm talking
about. I'm kind of new to Christianity as of October of last year, but yeah.
Yeah, I would love for you. T. Grogan, that's the thing. I bet Gavin, there's some way we can connect you together. Have a prescript, like a randos conversation topic. Chad's been talking about this. I think this is a great idea.
Mhm.
And then just have a
These,
conversation.
I mean, the questions he's asking, I think, are perfect because there's
Yeah.
so many people who have the same questions. And for me,
Yeah.
like I'm not deep into religion, and I'm not like the reason Paul would talk to Grimgriz is because he didn't have a lot to lose. I think he started saying that.
Yeah.
And so it's like I don't have a lot to lose. Like I'm a baby Christian.
Look at this. Here, there's a match
Yeah.
been made. We're matchmakers. That would be great. He'd love to.
And I always still think the best way with that, it was the same way I was before previously. And I made the point that I think the most important point about discipleship is not trying to get someone's doctrine straight. It's starting to live life with one another. And, I also think that this is a journey and not a destination. Like it's not knowledge acquisition. And so much, you can learn so much more when you, I think when you encounter anything, is finding someone you can just start walking your way into it slowly. And a lot of it is it's trying to, like, true repentance or metanoia is what you're talking about, Luke, was a total change of mind and outlook and way of seeing, right? That's really what repentance is. Yeah, it's turning around. And so part of this stuff is starting to just someone who has some experience a little further down the road is like, okay. And I think you already started to do you see what the power of that was? It's like, hey, Chad asked you for a prayer accountability partner. And you're like, yeah, I'll get up in the morning and do it. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll sit there with you. Right. And you did that. Right. And just even that's like part of the walk of starting to do things. And so that's where I think if I were to talk to a person who is the same thing, if I were leading my house church and you started to hang out with me, I wouldn't have given you a whole bunch of theological books to read or anything else. I would invite you in to start like, hey, why don't you try doing this little prayer thing every morning, 5 minutes? Why don't you just do this? Hey, we're going to go out and, we're going to do this. Why don't you start figuring out, hey, what's going on in your life? Hey, I'm having this struggle with my wife. Well, hey, why don't you stop doing that thing for 30 days, even though you think you're right or whatever? How about you just practice this thing, right? And it's starting to change your life through, certain really practical practices. I think that's the most important thing for anyone who wants to jump into anything.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's backwards to start with the propositions. It's totally backwards. And I think that someone was saying about Sunday, like, this is the place where I think Sunday school answers have failed people to a degree. They have failed people, and people are here trying to like, well, I don't want to totally reject this, or I'm interested in this, but I need to talk this, and I might need new words to figure out how to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. And everyone comes in. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to what Christian says. Ideally, I think I do agree. Yes, it's backward to start with the proposition, but the reality is that's pretty much the stew we've all been brought up in, and is the solution to tell the people that are still in that stew to say, "Oh no, you've got it all wrong," or is there a way to build a bridge from them starting with the proposition to a place of deeper understanding?
Well, that's essentially what Jordan Peterson has done, right? We live in an Enlightenment, scientific, rationalist world, largely. That's that's what T. Grogan said something earlier. Like my thing is like people would just say things clearly. Well, that has an assumption that there's this is clear, this is not clear. Like all these rational rules, science, like that's clearly right. And Peterson has basically done that though. But what he's shown through psychology and evolution is that it's pointing to something outside of itself, which is attention, consciousness, salience. Like my quote all the time, what you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. Robotics, like trying to teach a robot how to see will show you that. Because salience is very hard in robotics. They don't know how to do it. Or it's a very difficult thing to overcome.
I want to point out something Mick Mosov has said. He said, I'm interested in hobbits more than habits. And I think, I resonate deeply with that. And that got me into some trouble, though, as I moved into my 30s and closer to my 40s. You know, like one of the things old Peterson stuff too talks about what he thinks maybe what Christ is where the narrative and the narrative reality that we believe in and the literal or the what our reality touched. And so getting where does the fantasy world touch the reality world? And that has to happen through LARPing. That has to happen through embodiment of these ideals into your life. You can't just leave them in the book or in the brain.
Well, and LARPing works. Like that's whole Jordan Peterson's act as if. Like one of the things I always struggled with a bit, and I still struggle with it, would be someone comes to a church service, somehow they think they've come to believe they've made this decision, and then right away you're baptized in that service and you're getting all this stuff or whatever. Like belief comes after action, and like I said, it's a lot of times that you'll see in 12-step programs, many people will be asked to do things that they have no idea why they're being asked to do them. But they start doing them, and then I'm just going to tell you, these amazing things happen. So there's this real practical thing you hear in 12-step programs, which when people are first starting out, they'll say something like, well, maybe they've never maybe they're secular, never been around it, or they've been in church, whatever. And how do you pray? And they'll say, okay, well, here's what you're going to do. Put the shoes that you want to put on in the morning, put them under your bed and get down on your knees, right? And in the morning, say, please keep me sober today. And then at night, before you go into bed, put those shoes under the bed and get on your knees and say, thank you. Okay, so it starts there, right? Please and thank you. But it's getting you into this habit of getting into it's teaching you a very fundamental thing about in the morning and at night. That is the way you start a prayer rule. And then as you start to progress and you start doing more, you're like, well, I'm doing the please and thank you. Like, well, here's this prayer. Read this prayer in the morning. Why don't I want to read that prayer? Well, okay, fine. Who cares? Just read the prayer. So then they start reading the prayer. And you don't know, this isn't going to work or whatever. And all of a sudden they start, this, by the way, this is Chad's story. And all of a sudden he had, it took him a while. He might have said no for a bit, but it literally is like the acting as if actually works, because I think you need to get into act. You can act your way into a right way of thinking. You can't think your way into a right way of acting is kind of this thing that people would talk about. And it's that once you start putting some of these spiritual practices in, what will happen is some tangible, like you'll be transformed without even knowing why things are working. And all of a sudden you started dancing down, this path. And of course, over time, you hope that grows. And then you start finding the pieces that work for you best. But getting into some daily program of living, and that includes in your spiritual life too, that actually starts producing results. And then you can morph out to starting to read C.S. Lewis, and then or whatever. The one thing I also do want to point out is I say some of these simple things. And by the way, some people who know a lot of theology, putting your shoes under your bed would be very valuable for you. I'm serious. Like you need to learn how to do some actual practices. But depending on where someone comes in, the student will appear. If someone's like with Luke, when Luke shows up, he spent 20 years studying all this stuff. You don't have to take him back to 101. You got to meet him where he's at, to have certain conversations.
We all have to be, that's that kenotic self-emptying, man. You always got to meet people where they're at, or else you're not going to communicate with them.
So if you don't have a daily practice, you can roll a savings throw against one by choosing survival, social, wisdom, or heart as the basis for your savings throw. If it's over 10, you take half damage. Under 10, you take full damage from the mind control that follows. And apparently there's T-Grog brand mind control coming. So choose wisely. Survival, social, wisdom, or heart. Choose. Survivalist, prime 17. You're going to be all right. Socialist, you got disciples, whatever that means.
Nice discussion. Very nice.
Windows fella, Baker's Coven against the mind control. That's a 13. Hard folks, that's a natural 1. No bonuses apply. And Indigo kids, You got a 6. You got a 6.
Oh, Grim just came in for the savings throw. So T-Grog, you get your audio figured out. You're here. You're new.
I don't
You've
know.
been
Can you hear
commenting.
me?
We
Can you hear
can.
me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah. Nice discussion. Very nice. I was a Baptist Calvinist for a long time, but I find this stuff interesting because it's I like people talking in a civil manner, and that's about stuff, and it's cool. I used to be a science teacher though, so in mathematics, so I like clarity.
Yeah.
And I live in Mormon land,
Oh, okay.
and everybody's into feelings, spiritual, and visions, and all this crazy shit. And I see it as a con.
Yeah.
It's a con. So
Yeah.
It can be dangerous.
that's where I'm coming from. The problem I have with this, I went to a couple Estuary meetings in College
Oh, right.
Station.
Right. Yeah.
It opens the door to a lot of superstitious. It's like blow the doors off reality, and let's just have all these crazy
cult-like delusional.
Well, the problem is if you read the history of Christianity or the history of the Middle Ages or the history of the ancient world, people had all sorts of crazy ass, well, let's sacrifice our children to Baal.
Kill the witches.
Yeah.
Make Baal happy. Well, Baal doesn't exist. So there's no.
Are you?
That's the problem I have with all this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any problem with. I love the talking. I love
Yeah.
the dialogue. But in Mormon land, I can tell you this: we're the headquarters in Utah here of white collar crime.
Yeah.
We are the headquarters.
Okay.
And people fall for these scams because they get a spiritual witness. A spiritual witness telling them that it's great. It's a good thing. And to me, unfortunately, I see parallels here.
Yeah. Well, this is but that's a big reason of why I want you here and value here and want this kind of diversity, because that's a big part of that's what I was just saying. Because if you spend very much time in this little corner of the internet, if you've even figured out what this is, this thing that's coalesced around Paul Vanderklay and Jonathan Bugeaud and John Vervaeke post Jordan Peterson, that's like
right.
the broad scope. You'll find that in this particular community that's very person oriented, it's really pretty diverse. Like one of my best friends in here is this Sam Tiedemann, who's a biblical Unitarian. He doesn't believe in the Trinity.
Right.
He would be excommunicated from any Trinitarian church, but guess what? That guy knows early church theology.
Right.
Probably better than almost anyone I know. Probably more than anyone I know. I want him here. I want atheists here. Most of the people that are here have in some sense they've felt like a misfit or been excommunicated or deconstructed from Christianity. I mean, I never officially left Christianity.
How did you get away from your Baptist Calvinist roots?
Yeah.
How did I get away from it? Well, reading the Bible carefully can do a lot for you in that regard. What I saw in the Bible, and I read a lot of, I was really into it because, this is the truth, and this is important, and you have to know the truth. It's very important. So I would say the Bible constantly, read church history, but I was reading evangelicalism, a lot of evangelical stuff, evangelical. And I decided to read non-evangelical stuff, right?
Uh-oh.
And actually, I found that modern biblical scholarship actually was more true to the Bible, right? It was more honest about, like Yahweh and Elohim and these other demigods and angelology and all that stuff. It was more honest about that stuff and more true to the actual Bible than evangelicalism, or I didn't know that much about Catholicism, but I've learned a lot more about it recently. And I know a little bit about Orthodoxy, but not a lot. But reading the Bible diligently, and just kind of thinking, well, what is going, I mean, is this just a mind game I'm playing with myself here? That, I believe in Jesus's propitiation for my sins, and what,
words like propitiation.
How does that really work? Oh yeah, listen, I look, I still read the Bible.
I don't know what that word is, propitiation.
I know, that's what's so fun about this,
Unfortunately, I very few Christians that, in my experience, ever even finished the New Testament. So I'm interested in, well, there's an old saying by Thomas Henry Huxley: learn what is true so you can do what is right. Learn what is true so you can do what is right. So I go by these guys like, I started reading Huxley, Darwin, people like that. And I go, well, number one, what they're saying is clear. It's clear. Number two, it makes sense, right? If you know the truth, I'm interested in what's true. That's what I'm interested in. If it's orthodoxy, great.
Right?
That's all I'm interested in. I don't care about all this other, but the problem I have in any religious space I've been in, if you like to use that terminology, is people have all these divergent views and there's no way to sort out truth from error, or fact from fiction. There's just no way to do it.
So
that's why I like science.
You got out by reading the Bible. Can I just be a little bit more, pry a little bit more and ask how you got into it? Were you raised by Christian parents and just?
I grew up with a lot of alcoholic parents and grandparents, and I think emotionally I felt abandoned, neglected, very sad. And I'm a little bit, if you haven't noticed it, I'm probably a little bit on the spectrum here. Okay. So I'm very obsessive and autistic. Right.
I might know something about that.
So I'm kind of a loner, and I felt very alienated in high school. And I read a book called The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, which was the biggest selling book in the entire 1970s. And that basically said the world was going to end by 1984. Okay. So I read that book and I go, oh my gosh, God loves me. Jesus loves me. This is fantastic. I'm not just some weird guy, who can't talk to girls. And so it's an emotional thing. And I see religion that way. It's an emotional thing. It's emotionally comforting to people. It's very comforting. But the problem is heroin's comforting too. So
I've not done heroin, but I've done psilocybin and cannabis, and they're different. They are different.
Yeah. So there's ways to comfort yourself besides these ways that can lead to, and most people that are religious are very nice. Like most people are nice, but I was not a nice person as a religious person. You guys would all be in hell. I mean, no question. There's no question about it. You'd all be going to hell.
Lots of people think I'm going there.
Hell's an eternal pit of burning fire where you're literally burning. Okay. So that doesn't make for a nice person. That makes for an asshole. Okay.
This sounds like a version of Christianity, though.
Well, that's a version that's very popular in church history.
Well, this is like
popular.
This is what my buddy Jason, who's in the little corner, likes to say all the time. He's like, "That's fine. Like, you want to believe that, but then if you're also a Christian, then you're called to love your enemies. So you're going to hell then."
Well, yeah. I mean, look, it doesn't make sense. I grant that, Luke. It doesn't make any. From my perspective now, it doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous.
Get in that
It's
pit.
absurd.
Here he is.
It's absurd. God is love. God is all loving. God's perfect love. Not only is God not just love, he is love.
Yeah,
and
one
he's
of the
sending
questions.
people to hell because they don't know anything about Jesus. It's like nuts.
Well, come over to our side, T. Grog. We're Pocket Tostasis people here on Grill Country, so you'll fit in great.
Yeah,
Luke
but
Luke did a whole tirade on what you just mentioned there, and he coined it POS theology, and he set off quite the firestorm here in this little corner.
Well, I appreciate that, Lance. The problem I have with Paul Vanderklay, I'm on his case constantly. He's confessionally a reformed minister.
Paul.
That's what they believe.
On notice.
That's what they believe.
Listen, I've pushed Paul on this for years and years and years. Paul,
he won't be honest about it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, he is, but Paul has had a few conversations on hell stuff. I mean, the topic of hell and universalism are two of the big pet topics, the Trinity that this corner loves to talk about. I mean, it's all, and there's very diverse opinion on all that stuff.
Well, and I would also say this, I don't want to out Paul. And I don't think Paul's certainly not going to go against much of the Reformed theology. Heck, he's a CRC pastor. However, because he is a CRC pastor, he probably has some shades that he wouldn't proclaim publicly because he understands his role of what he has to be as a CRC pastor. But I bet if given the freedom,
Lance, conspiracy theory.
Confirm.
I know, because the reason why I know this is I have pastor friends who there are things that, and they're fine being within a certain. They understand because of their responsibility and what they are, their job they're given. There are certain things that they might believe different shades that might shock the conscience of others in their denomination, and they won't say it. But if they happen to retire, they might actually tell you a couple of things that they really believe that might, go a little bit against what. But because of the role, like you understand, hey, this is the gig. And I'm okay with the gig because of some of these other things. So,
right. Here's a great quote from a Christian pastor, but it's very hard to get a man to see something if his salary depends upon him not seeing it.
Well,
you can apply that to religion. You can apply it to a lot of things, though.
What's the timeline on you becoming out as a physicalist atheist versus being a pastor? How old were you? When did all that happen?
Well, I was never a pastor, thank God. I took Greek in college. I got a C on it just because I knew the Gospel of John pretty well in English. But I got out. I was a Christian from 1974 to 1984, roughly.
So when the world didn't end, you were like, well.
Yeah, the world didn't end. That's correct. It didn't. Maybe it did end, metaphorically speaking. See,
that's not
maybe in our imagination it ended. See,
I just wanted to toss in there was a checkbox for my church that said, "Do you support the statement of faith?" And it's like at some point I was like, "Can I support this thing even though I don't believe it?" Because I want to say I don't know.
Getting too technical, Gavin.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I look around and I see people who have their lives transformed, and this thing that they believe is a part of it. And it's like, man, I like that people's lives get better, even though I don't I'd rather say I don't know and pray that God would reveal it to me. Right.
And I think to me, that's premature. That's so Gavin, you've mentioned this previously, you mentioned that you were kind of presented with that. And I'm like, that is so cart before the horse. Someone who's new, bringing his family, how can you ask that question after a month? And then some of that is to get baptized, you do have to, there's some, they'll say, okay, this is, and it's not going to be the Westminster Confession of Faith, but they're going to list out some, a whole bunch of propositions. Do you believe this stuff? And you're like, dude, I've been here a month, man. How could I even?
Maybe it'll take 10 years. Maybe it'll take 10 years or 20 years. It's why do I have to say yes or no to something? Right. I told him, I emailed him. I said, you need to change your checkbox and let me fill in. I don't know.
That's true.
Which, by the way, I think with some of those things, if we're all being honest, I think 20 or 30 years in, some of those things I would still like to check box, and will probably die with the checkbox of I don't know.
Just to go back on a part of Tigger's story, speaking to the emotional aspect of the evangelical gospel, I think that's one of the things that I'm attracted to in this corner. It's Martin Shaw, I think, phrased it as the rewilding of Christianity, which is taken away from the safe Jesus and encountering the wild Jesus, the one that makes you uncomfortable and not just makes you feel good because you think the world's going to end. Neil.
Hey, what's up? So I just watched the Malcolm and Simone episode on Knights and Kings. They go into this whole thing about how there's 4 types of men: kings, knights, philosophers, and mystics. And the general point is that most people should be knights, and a few people should be kings, and then the best people should be philosophers, and no one should be a mystic because they only serve the stupid people.
Oh,
Stupid people aren't necessary. At least that's what I took away from it. And I think it's very vain for everyone to think they're not a stupid person. Because I think
Dunning-Kruger, man.
Everyone is stupid. We don't know at all what's going on. And people kind of look down on the granny faith or whatever, the grandma who just goes along with everything. It's why not? Why not go along with everything? And also struggle and think about things, but I think
not everyone's path is your path or
and
someone
there's no way for the stupid people to not be necessary. As one, I really hope that's
well, there's a big
We're supposed to love the lost sheep.
Right.
And the lost sheep end up getting lifted up very high.
There's a big ego.
I think that's why people with integrity have to be, people with deep character have to be in the king, because like T. Krogh just said, is that those people will be harmed. They will be they'll be taken advantage of. So you have to have people that are searching for truth, and then people that are leading the people that are searching for truth. And back to T. Krogan, I was curious on. So here we are in 2024. That's 20 years or 30 years that you haven't been, I guess, a Christian. So you obviously went through, in the aughts, the new atheism spectrum, and in the last 5 to 10 years, now you're finding yourself, and I'm sure that kind of bolstered a lot of confidence in your journey. And now you're finding yourself basically in a conversation with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Christians. How does that fit into your story?
Well, it depends on what you mean by Christian, right?
Hey, now we're talking.
I would say this. Look, I think that I like talk. I think all you guys are quite intelligent, by the way. Okay, that's not to be, flattering you or anything, but the fact that you're even willing to have a conversation like this is kudos to you all, because I can tell you that when I was a Baptist, you try and talk to people about stuff like this, their eyes would go glaze over or something.
Similar experience to me.
Yeah. The reason I want to know what I think is, I lost my wonderful wife of 33 years 3 years ago.
Sorry about that, T.
I've been one of the luckiest sons of bitches on the planet. Okay. I have a wonderful family. I married a fantastic woman, fantastic, way above my pay grade. I live in a resort. I'm healthy. I mean, I've had a fantastic life. And so I'm getting older. You want to contemplate these things. You say, well, I was wrong about being a crazed Baptist. I was wrong about that. I was completely convinced that I was right. Totally convinced.
Mm-hmm.
And that, so I want to stay open-minded. On the other hand, I don't want to be a chump. Okay. And, you know, people have tried to get me to join the Mormon church. And I said, well, number one, to be a temple worthy Mormon, I got to pay 10% of my gross income. Okay. So this better be true. 10% of your gross before taxes? That's a lot of money, depending on what money you have. So I'm interested, to me, this is engaging. It's fun. I like the intellectual stimulation. I like to learn new things from different people. Atheism is not emotionally comforting. It is not. Okay. Churches are much nicer. There's a feeling of, I think it's an evolved thing. Churches are much nicer, even if you don't believe a damn thing they're talking about. All right. They're nice people there, and it's a community, and they're like, playing church. And atheism is, but see, if I want emotion, if I'm really having a struggle with emotional comfort, I'll go see a psychiatrist. See, that's the way I approach it. In other words, if I'm having a crisis of depression, or my God, what is the meaning of life, or something, I'll go see a psychiatrist or a cognitive behavioral therapist or somebody like that, where I can talk things out and work things out. And yeah, so I'm, if you guys, what I'm saying is, I'm interested in what this quote space has, if anything.
I think
for me.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of therapy, spent a lot of money on therapy, and there's a truth to the fact that you're spending money for this person. It's their job, and that's a very different kind of relationship versus a mutual meeting of people that are kind of searching. That but not to diminish the help that it can have and has had in my life, but it's not the same. It's a different kind of relationship,
Yeah, I just want to add that from what Tigran said, it sounds like you've chosen the right place to play, because your story maps on, even though differently to a lot of the stories I've heard from people around this space. We got to a level, we had a certain level of certainty in something, and that came crumbling down. And then now we're trying to figure out, okay, now what? And yeah.
That's been one of my big things lately too, this is a quote that I love, but it's like, tell me the God you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in it either. Or tell me the fill in the blank you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in it either. Like I was thinking as you were talking about all those things, I bet you and I could sit down and have a conversation about theology and a lot of problems that you had of things that you were taught. And I bet we'd agree on a lot. I bet we'd agree on a whole lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, guys.
Well, but
because I'm autistic, I don't get the social cues that well.
No.
Like when people are saying, "Shut the fuck up, man." I mean, I don't get the feedback. See,
I think part of it is that, I mean, I'm very concerned with this space, especially in live streams in hospitality. You've never popped on before. I've wanted you to hop on before. If you have something to say, I definitely want you to talk. I talk plenty. So that's all.
I like to listen, but I'm kind of a gadfly, so I just look. everything is a mixed bag, in my experience. Jordan Peterson says, he says some very good things.
Mm-hmm.
Paul and Jonathan Peugeot, on the other hand, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about half the time. The up, the down, the higher, the up and the thing.
You're doing it.
It's like, I go, what the hell is this guy talking about?
Yeah, I have a hard time with these things.
I up and it's like the lateral and the horizontal. It's like, what?
But this is part of
what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, one person's up as another person's down. Like, it's so weird.
What's so fun about that is I just got this message the other day because in my live stream yesterday I mentioned, and this is, I would love to know what you think.
My live stream yesterday. Hey, real quick, T-Grog, can we get back to the witches in the estuary? That was a fascinating topic. The Red Church card of the show is the Seven of Hearts. It sounds like
You're hilarious.
You went to Estuary and ran into witches, and it was 2 estuaries, and they were overrun with witches, and it made you uncomfortable. Can you talk about that some more, please?
There were no witches there, as far as I know. I mean, maybe they're undercover witches, or they were lower on they were under. Well, there's the horizon, and then there's the hierarchy, and then there's what's underneath. Maybe they were down there somewhere. I don't really know. There was a Baptist guy. There was a Baptist.
You were turned off by a couple.
There was a Baptist, an Episcopalian who didn't believe in the resurrection, and a Catholic guy who said, well, alchemy was great or something. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was fun, but because I was a creedalist, shame on me. St. Athanasius says, this is what you must believe, or you cannot be saved. This is the Catholic faith. Whosoever believes this is okay. If you don't believe it, you're damned, basically. It's clear. It's not the hierarchy and the lower. I see this as like Gnosticism. It's like inner light, and wow, I've got the inner light. Jordan's got the inner light. Jonathan's got it. Paul's got it. And you're trying to figure out, what is it? It's like mystical. So, like, if you ever seen the movie Mystery Men, there's a guy in there. There's a character in there called the Sphinx, and he says all these weird things that sound profound, but they're just bullshit. If you don't master your rage will become your master. The Sphinx.
That's an interesting one. You just mentioned as an interesting one.
Yeah,
I mean, your rage. Like I'm talking to my children about this topic specifically, like 2 nights in a row. So
see the movie.
Okay.
And you'll see that this character is like, he says a lot of this stuff, and it's like people are going, wow, man. It's like there's nothing to it, so I don't know. But
the only thing I would push back on is that, I mean, that's the same story that the new atheists were telling people. You're the brights. You've got the inner knowledge. It's the same story.
Well, I would recommend, and by the way, I'm a big book reader. If you guys have any books that you'd recommend that I read, I'm reading Dominion right now by Tom Holland. Okay. But I'd read An Atheist's Guide to Reality by Alex Rosenberg.
That Reformed pastor's colonizing your mind, T-Grog. He's got you reading Dominion.
Unfortunately, and I have a kind of a bias with this because I've dealt with so many Christian apologists. Okay. And I find them disingenuous and lying by omission to
Amen.
To an enormous degree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
So I am poisoned. Okay. By dealing with Christian apologetics. I I'm gonna get off my camera here, but I want to show you a book. I paid for this book. I paid for the research for this book. It's a Christian apologetics book by a Christian apologist that I knew very well. We were like buddies, best buds.
I hope I know.
But I paid for this book, and then I'm reading this book, and that helped kick me over into atheism. Because I said, there's so many lies and half truths in this book.
You got the playbook.
That this is bullshit. My book, I commissioned this book, and I paid a lot of money back in the 80s for this book to be written. And the guy that wrote it was smart, very smart. And I read the book and I go, that's wrong. That's wrong. Every page had bullshit on it. Okay. Every page, literally. And I go, if this is the best somebody can do to defend Christianity, Christianity's false. It's false. I'll show you the book. I'm going to turn my camera off because I'm sitting in my underwear here. Hold me.
Okay.
We got to keep it PG here.
Oh man,
It's hard to find the best. That's I'm a bit on that. My mind works in a similar way, but try to solve that problem of finding the best person to write that book. It's like that's a hard
a
problem.
Christian apologetics book.
Here's the book.
Anything, the best.
Here's the
Try
book,
to find
folks.
the best at anything.
The New
Here's the
Atheism
book.
and the Erosion of Freedom.
I paid for this book. I paid for the research. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
What exactly about this bullshit?
And who's the author?
Robert A. Morey,
Okay.
a doctorate from Westminster Seminary. He was a minor
Westminster.
apologist, but I knew him quite well. And he's got a lot of blurbs on here for how great the book is from the usual suspects. So, and I told Bob, I told Bob it was bullshit, and I was trying to help him correct it, but you know, then I finally just said, look, I don't believe this stuff anymore, and you know, good luck. And but yeah, so we wouldn't have a dialogue like we're having here, certainly. But he told me basically that a lot of people fall away and then they come back, and you know, blah blah blah. So
It's true.
Maybe
Yeah.
you're just not elect. You ever thought of that?
well,
I'm just kidding.
he's got a video on YouTube, Bob Moore. You can look it up. It's called "Why God Hates Some People." It's amazing. God hates people, and he goes, you know, it's a lie that God loves everybody. He hates
And there's in
people.
the
Well,
hands
given
of an
the-
angry God.
Given the fact that you told me that, I would bet that some of the issues you're having with that might be a lot of what Luke would call POS. That's a cleaned up version of piece of shit theology. And so he has big issues with certain points of popular theology.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I think when Luke says like some of these things that you're pointing at or having a disagreement with, Luke's probably sitting there going, oh, I bet if he and I had a conversation about all the stuff you thought was BS, Luke probably agrees with you on probably 90% of it.
Well, and this is one of my big struggles with, because I get into this with Christians all the time, because I self-identify as a Christian universalist, believing that eventually all will be reconciled to God, however you conceive of that, which I don't know. I can't lay out the details of how it's going to happen. But a lot of people will say, you know, they'll criticize that, saying like, well, that just will make people flippant about morality or whatever, or it will make people just like not care about things. But the problem is there are so many, how many people like yourself have been told that God and the way that hell works out is this, what's called infernalism, eternal conscious torment, where God is mainly a distant, divorced, uncaring judge who just is going to punish you based off of choices that you made and whatever level of maturity for an infinite, unending duration of time in a literal burning hell. A lot of people have left Christianity because they've been told that's the only form of God that you can accept. And if you reject that, then you're not a Christian. Well, I don't agree with that framing of what God is.
I just wanted
I
to
also-
chime in. There was a conversation with my wife this morning, and it's like I see a pattern here, like what's happening here, and that like we can challenge like the institutions, the traditions, the confessions, and like the internet and YouTube and these kinds of conversations. We get to do that, and it's happening in many spaces.
Yep.
Like it's happening in construction, it's happening with food, and it will make its way into like the systems of education. These things will change because of the kinds of conversations we have where people are actually pursuing the truth, trying to care for people. Like all this stuff's very good.
Yeah.
Just
And
because
T-Grog, I
they
think
did it that way doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever.
I think the thing that the projects on the search for truth and why this space can sometimes feel Gnostic or mystical and woo-woo, as the millennials say, is because the search for truth is a very kind of concrete idea. It appears like a very concrete idea, this thing outside of you. Science will reveal this. Religion will reveal this. Is this true? All of these arguments sound. Can I get everything to fit? When I think what this space is, or even in the journey into therapy or whatever, is a search for an internal truth, and that's and this has been hit on in this argument already today. Do you believe? Can you sign on to this, confession of faith at your church? Check the boxes like cart before the horse. When am I dealing with myself truthfully on it? Am I looking at myself truthfully? That has way more impact on your life than the literal nature of scripture or the literal or if the scientific proofs of X, Y, and Z. Those things will not have very much impact in your life versus if you can be honest with yourself about who you are and in relationship to the people that you do life with. And I think that has to be the foundation for the search for truth, not the late great planet Earth, or not the God delusion. Like, I think that the search for truth has to start within yourself. And that's why it can sound so Gnostic-y here. And then you can build on top of that. And somebody just made a comment about that those things can help purify the truth, but it has to start with being personally honest with yourself.
That's just so, I agree with you, but what's really hard about that is a ruthless internal honesty means you have to rid yourself of fear. And
yeah, it does.
Good luck.
Listen.
Well, and
I've done it, man. I've done it. I in a moment discovered the difference between fear and being scared. I was no longer afraid of the truth, of every shitty thing, shameful thing that I had ever done to the person I was supposed to love forever. And coming to that, all of a sudden I was no longer afraid, and I no longer feared the truth. I was still scared of the consequences of what the truth meant for my life.
Yeah.
But you do have to face it, and that's the fear of trust, of radical trust. Abraham and Isaac's story sounds like absolute bullshit. What the hell is God asking this man to do? He's asking him for radical trust. I don't care about the context of child sacrifice. I mean, I should care, whatever, but he's asking for radical trust, that trusting is better for some reason. And that was an internal situation between a man and God.
Yeah, absolutely.
T-Grog, I gotta go. I gotta head out here. But T-Grog, I just want to. I think it seems that, by the way, the fact that you found your way into this little corner through the Luke Thompson and Grail country world is amazing to me.
The wooiest of all the corners.
The wooiest of all. But your voice and the questions you're asking are going to be really important, because a ton of people are out there, I know, that are watching these videos who have gone down that path and are kind of where you're at. And so the questions you have and how you want to challenge certain things, I think, are like massively important for us. The other thing, when I'm listening to you, it's very obvious to me that you're a seeker. You've been seeking different things, and you found yourself in this place that feels good for you now. But you're still out there. You're still seeking a little bit. You're open-minded. This corner is built on people who are willing to have these good faith conversations, even if we would disagree with things. And when you mentioned, so I would just say this, like, I used to consume in the early 2000s a lot of apologist sort of stuff, and I, to be honest with you, it makes my toes curl a little bit right now, and I can't watch it anymore. So, but that doesn't mean that it's bad or it's not serving its purpose for certain people at a certain time. But like when you said that, I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm with you. Like I cannot like Williams Lane Craig and stuff like that. Like I just can't even stomach it anymore. And so, but I have found my way into a full belief in a God of my understanding and a place where I'm going to practice it, so on and so forth. So keep on the path, brother. And even if you stay, was it a physicalist, atheist or something like that through your whole time in the corner, keep coming back.
One of my, also like the guy who started the Bridges of Meaning Discord, which is this other thing in this corner. I mean, and he doesn't participate in a lot more in here, but I don't know if he'd call himself a physicalist. He's an atheist. I mean, he's not a Christian. I don't know. Because here's the thing. This is how you get into groupthink and echo chambers. When everybody self-identifies around a certain thing and is repeating all the same platitudes and Sunday school answers, you actually stop seeing. This is why you can't tell the differentiation. It just all becomes this monolithic one. You need that diversity to be able to think well. Otherwise, you have no contrast, and you can't see without contrast.
I'm curious, T. Grog, did you try? It's been 20 odd years since you left the Baptist thing. Did you try any other woo-woo stuff? Was there a yoga phase in your?
That's a good question. I was very lucky. I came from a long line of alcoholics, and alcohol never did much for me.
Praise God.
Yeah.
Which I attribute to pure chance, genetically, just pure luck. So did some partying, and I tried, some heavier drugs, and I did, stuff like that. But I was running a company, and then I met my wife, and and then just things kind of happen. I mean, when you're raising a family, you're working, you're busy as hell, so you don't really have a lot of time to think about this stuff. Now I'm retired and my kids are grown up, so that's why I'm reading Tom Holland. I'm trying to do it with an open mind. I'm only like the second chapter in, but I can tell you, Richard Carrier, I just saw a live stream with him on Myth Vision podcast, and he said Tom Holland's full of shit. That's all. He's just full of shit. That's, but I want to maintain an open mind about it. But I'm going to check what Tom Holland says. If Tom Holland says XYZ, I'm going to check XYZ. Okay? I'm not taking it on faith because it makes me feel good or wow, see, I'm a Christian. I'm a good person because Tom Holland said Christians are responsible for everything. Good.
I win.
See,
I win.
I'm not going to buy. I've had that bullshit told me many times. And when I check it out, it turns out to be bullshit. So I'm going to fact check everything he says. And I'll fact check atheists too, by the way. I don't just fact check Christians.
So can I ask?
People lie all the time. You got to be very careful. So, yeah.
I just want to ask a question and this isn't like a.
I hope I answered your question. And by the way, thank you for your questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you did. Thank you for answering them.
I do. You guys are very nice people. I thank God for that. So, not the typical Christians, unfortunately. Fortunately.
So this isn't a gotcha question. I hate gotcha questions. They're like veiled.
I don't care. I'll take gotcha questions.
I don't like them, so I'm just telling you up front that this isn't intended that way. So, when you say you want to fact check things and not take things on faith, like essentially to me that seems like an infinite regress, because at some point, like you fact check someone with what someone else has said, and then like with what someone else has said, eventually like who do you trust?
Well, that is a problem. And we're all stuck using our own reason and logic. This is like morality. They say, well, what about that authority? What about in that certain infinite regress of authorities?
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, we're stuck here as humans, and we have to make decisions.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to go with your own intuitions. I do that in quotes because that's a big thing. Intuitions, reason, and logic. Okay. And you're stuck. Okay. So yeah, you're right. That's a big problem. Under determination and infinite regress and all that. That was
Yeah.
But you're stuck. You have to live in the world. You have to make decisions. You have to decide whether you pay 10% of your gross income to a church that claims it's the only true church.
Right.
Things like that. So yeah, you're stuck. Okay, well, that's it. That's how I look at it. I mean, I used to worry about stuff like that. And then I said, well, everybody's got to kind of call it like they see it. Right.
Everybody's got to do that.
Why would you marry that girl? But people told me, you're nuts marrying your wife. You're insane. This woman's a lawyer. She's a good lawyer. She's going to clean your ass out. So I'm stuck. I got to use my reason, my intuition. And fortunately, I lucked out. But you got to make your own decision. You're stuck. Existentially stuck.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's a great answer. Thank you. Sam, here he is, the famous biblical Unitarian himself.
I'm Luke's tongue's interpreter.
They called you a monster earlier, Sam.
Who called me a monster?
I did.
What context?
One did. We all agreed.
What sort of monster is that?
Well, I was just saying, like, you weren't like a super OG randos, but everybody thinks of you as like an OG rando.
No, I was like the last of the OG randos. I snuck in the door right before the OG door closed.
I don't know where the cutoff was.
It was when it got much harder to get on Paul's calendar.
Oh, okay.
That's like when you couldn't just click on the Calendly link and find something anytime you wanted. That's when.
So T-Grog, this is a perfect example. Sam and I are really good friends. We talk all the time offline. We have each other's phone numbers. But I've learned more about the specific doctrines of the Trinity, having been a Christian my whole life, in talking to someone who does not self-identify as a Trinitarian.
We're not allowed to use the phrase self-identify, Luke. Didn't you see that in the comments section the other day?
That's funny, self-identify.
Because Jordan Hall was self-identifying as a Christian, and people were upset about a positive use of the phrase self-identifying. So we can't help but be just who we are and what comes out of us.
Some words are poisoned. Like, why are they poisoned?
Because that's what always happens with words.
It's not fair.
So anyhow, like this is why I love this whole arena of people where you're not harvesting the fringes and excluding people based on whatever label they want to put on themselves, because then you actually learn from people. You're not in the echo chambers where everybody's just saying the right things, where like people are like, you're no longer a Christian because you deny whatever. Pick your poison.
Oh, I get told that plenty of times. It's not
right.
that they don't tell me that, or it's not that certain people don't wish I was excluded. It's that this is the corner where it's not possible to really exclude people. The only person who can exclude you is yourself, or if you do something incredibly stupid and burn too many bridges. But no one has the central authority to exclude anyone, really.
See, and this is Paul. Look, Paul loves to troll me. Luke is very concerned about these rules because I'm like, he'll say I'm anti-propositional, but I'm anti-propositionalism. There's a great verse in the Bible, 1 Timothy 1:23. The law is just if you use it lawfully. It's about action. It's about being in the world. There's law and there's a spirit. You can use the law unlawfully. You can use rules to exclude.
And we're concerned about the rules, Paul, because both Luke and I have been burned by rules enough times to know what the dark side of these rules are. I'll even say part of the reason why the Chicago Bridges of Meaning, Estuary, Jordan Peterson, whatever we call ourselves group is not in the Estuary network is because I'm still distrustful of anything that has rules or anything that could ever turn on me.
Yeah.
And it's not like I think John Van Donk is about to excommunicate me, because John Van Donk is perfectly excommunicatable for his own beliefs. But
aren't we all?
Aren't we all? But how long before someone else is in charge and they're like, wait a minute, you have salmon here? No way.
And this is where, like, you said this, I think, T-Grog, in a comment the other day, is like a lot of the atrocities of the modern Western world have to do with religion and Christianity. I completely agree because of this very dynamic. And I think a lot of, like, Peugeot was talking about this the other day, because when Christ came in, Antichrist came in. Counterfeit, mammon, that which professes to be Christ, but instead of uniting, actually divides, but calls itself Christ. That's what Antichrist is.
Well, it depends on what you're reading, right? Since it's only used 3 times in the Bible, it's a matter of some controversy, right?
Antichrist?
Yeah.
It's 1 John 2 primarily, right?
And here's a little beef I have too. I notice that this is the apologetic space I come from. Apologists are world experts on every possible subject. They're world experts on cosmology, psychology, physiology, brain science. They're world experts. What qualifies Jonathan to be an expert on anything except art? You make these grand pronouncements. Well, it's the Antichrist and it's this and it's, well, he's not a biblical scholar. He's some artist that pontificates about stuff like this. And it's like, I don't go to my plumber for brain surgery tips. Okay. People have certain areas of expertise, and that's what their expertise is in, not, whatever. I'll just declare myself an expert. I'm an expert on everything. I'm a life coach.
What if there's an Antichrist in me? Like maybe I'm working on the Antichrist that is in me.
So this idea that people can just, like, I don't know if you've seen this. I saw this on Paul's channel. I raised hell about it. Jordan Peterson has this thing about Exodus. There's no biblical scholars in the whole group. They're sitting there pontificating about Exodus and what it really means. It really means this. See,
listen,
these people are just bullshitting. They're just like spouting off. Well, yeah, it means this. It's like,
it's just remember that was a celebrity Bible study that was filmed for the public. That's what that was. And I wish I was part of that Bible study. It sounded like one of the most interesting Bible studies that I never got to be a part of. And I think that this little corner is pretty anti-credentialist, but that doesn't mean that anything you say goes. You have to earn your credibility by being interesting and by having other people punch at you or poke at you in the comment section and see how you stand up to that.
Holy cow, Jacob Federecci likes you. So you're getting love from one of the most disagreeable people in the corner.
Jacob, he's beating one of Jacob's drums about subject matter experts and how you can, you need to be able to distribute your cognition. Jacob loves credentials.
Well,
he's not.
I don't feel qualified to talk about a lot of topics. I think I'm a fairly smart individual. Maybe the Dunning-Kruger's kicked in with me, but I don't sit there and pontificate about cosmology, quantum mechanics, and all this shit. It's like, are you kidding me? You got to really know. You got to go through years of study to understand this shit. You can't just, I read a book on it by, Deepak Chopra, and now I'm an expert on quantum. It's stupid. It's absurd.
I read the Book of Five Rings, Miyamoto Musashi, best swordsman in Japan, and then he studied calligraphy to become a better swordsman. And so, there's some things where, even though you're a carver, that can help you become a better husband, right? It's like, so you have to be careful with that too.
I agree. I totally agree with that because you learn learning how to play the piano can make you a better student. Or there's a spread. Yeah,
the institutions that credential, even look at what's happening to Peterson right now with his credentialing. Like, does it have anything to do with his ability to be how good he was as a clinical psychologist?
No,
or his research, or his influence. But he's done lab. He's created products and done lab work and stuff. So like,
I would say this. Yeah. I think that's
Hi, Paul. That's the question.
I'm
That's
so
the-
glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
I've been praying for this moment. Here we are.
Well, obviously Yahweh has answered your prayers. That means it's true, right?
Oh, you have no idea. You have
The
no
only way
idea.
this will be better. The only way this will be better is if we close in a prayer where you accept the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior.
I've got the guitar.
Lord and Savior.
I'm
Lord
waiting
and
for an
I've got the
appearance
guitar.
like the Apostle
Good play.
Paul. I'm waiting.
Get the music going, Christian. We need
There
that
you go.
strumming
I'm
in the
waiting.
background.
Psychotechnologize him. Psychotechnologize his brain.
No,
Unfortunately, Paul comes in and I have to. No, I'm not running away, Paul. I do have to work out in 15 minutes. So I do
Oh,
have
man.
to go. I'm an old man and I have to work out. So
All right, Paul, you've got 15 minutes to close this thing.
I could probably leave. I could probably give you 5 more minutes because I have to drive over there, of course. So.
Yeah,
I
PBK, is
just got
this
triggered by
about
the
making
expert
Christian?
thing, which is, I mean, it's expertism. It just is. It's going away, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a point, that there aren't degrees of technical knowledge, but none of us. It's exactly the same dilemma that you talked about before in terms of the Luke.
No.
This isn't all about you, Luke.
I'm trying,
Yes,
Paul.
it is. Yes, it is.
Doesn't work.
Oh, Jacob's going to be so unhappy with you and your StreamYards. Oh no, that's even worse.
Okay, well, listen, Jacob told me to do it, and I'm trying to listen to
No,
Jacob.
don't listen to Jacob. There's your first mistake. No, but it's the same as the infinite regress. You can't know enough. And so, it's like when you have a medical problem, go ask your physician. Now, on one hand, that's the best place to start. On the other hand, he's still a physician. And so we all have this sort of 80-20 rule about experts where we, you should look at expertise about 80% of the time, but make sure you got 20% that's sort of wondering about your local doctor. Take me off this thing, Luke. I don't want to be on the big screen. I got enough of me on the internet. I don't need
Old men don't look good close up.
That's actually
exactly.
That's a good.
So, T-Grog, we got to have you in for a randos conversation. I'm so glad you came in. This is awesome.
I'm retired. I got to do something.
I got a question.
Send me an email.
Can this little corner get bigger than a Dunbar number in terms of the number of people who are
What's a Dunbar number?
The Dunbar number is sort of like chimpanzee troops tend to have about 200-ish, chimpanzees, and you can remember that many faces and sort of keep a mental history of their personality and all the nice things they've done for you and all the bad things they've done for you, right? It's like a credentialing system in your mind, but it only seems to be able to handle a certain number. You can't do this with 10,000 things, maybe a few hundred at most. And so I feel like we're dodging the credentialing system because we're below a Dunbar number in this little corner. And obviously there are a lot of lurkers who know the Dunbar people, but who aren't in the Dunbar circle themselves. But I think that's part of the nature of our group.
Yes. And what we are doing with YouTube and these conversations is playing with that Dunbar number. And the key thing, the key takeaway this morning is we all wanted to talk to T. Grog because he's been visible in the comments section and we wanted to see more of him. That's the key takeaway this morning. And
because of his expertise.
Talks about personal. This is what we're doing. We're playing with this Dunbar number.
Well, I'm feeling very loved. That's fantastic.
Oh, don't worry. There's some people going to comment on this about PVK and his vicious love bombing people. That's so wrong and grifty.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. I can go to the Mormon church. They'll do the same thing.
Exactly.
So, exactly.
It's a tactic to get you to convert.
Yeah, the best thing about us is that we're
that
not
must mean
under
Mormonism's
the banner
true, right?
of heaven.
It's true in a vertical sense. See.
But we are playing with that because we do, and because the Dunbar number is extremely stressed right now because of social media. And so what we're trying to do is figure out different ways to tribe.
Oh,
And
is that the
confession is
Garth?
just one way.
Is that the Garth
Campfires.
Brooks song, "A New Way to Tribe"? A new way to tribe. Sorry. There are no experts here, guys. Just so you know, nobody's ever claimed to be one. That's the only 2 cents I wanted to put in. Like I would say, I think that Luke is an expert on personalism, but he would never claim to be an expert on such a thing. And if he did, I would be like, "You're not a fucking expert." But that was my whole beef. I'm really sorry. I'm really glad to hear from you, T. Grog. It was fascinating discussion, guys. Really good. And Tim, what's up, Tim? Holla. I gotta
Well, I
go.
do have to run, guys. And Paul, I don't hate you. I think
I know you
your
don't.
ideas are unclear and I don't understand them.
Brian
Fair enough.
does.
That's all.
That's not Paul's job. Paul isn't the have the ideas person. He is the landscaper or the salience landscaper director of everybody. It's not Paul's job to invent the propositions.
Or a catalyst. He's not that kind of leader. Everybody wants.
Well, we're going to talk about the Heidelberg Confession at some point. So
Catechism. I'm the expert. It's Heidelberg Catechism.
thank you. I
Well,
Have a
appreciate
good
that.
workout.
Enjoy your
Appreciate
workout,
that.
Pete Grog. Thanks
Grog.
for
Gotta go. Gotta go.
All right.
Bye.
Oh man, Tim, unfortunate. Come and rain on our parade.
Yeah, I'm going to take, since he had to go, I'm going to take his spot.
Oh, are you an atheist? Oh, hallelujah. I keep telling you, we have trouble keeping him stocked, so we need more atheists to come in.
I don't even know if I knew that. We don't
Well, are
talk
you
about such
complaining
things.
that people haven't been declaring their confessions, Luke? Because atheism is a confessional.
Well, no, like Tim and I have spoken a bunch on the phone and things. I mean, we've talked a lot. Like I know Tim moderately well, and I just whatever hasn't come up.
Well, I'm gonna take my pants off here. So
What?
I want to
It's
hit
called
on
a porky pig, right? That's a porky pig.
Oh gosh.
I want to hit on the institutional and the credentialing just for a second, because I mean you can find the same information that you could learn in a college online, and you can you literally can put yourself through the education. Now you don't get tested necessarily, but it's a new world. It's a new world for what it means to be an expert, because it also
How do we
means
control who gets accredited and how we can leverage that power, that authority into power that we can use for a point, so that we
well,
can
now
get the goal that we
YouTube
want.
YouTube controls it now with who they allow to ascend.
yeah.
Because really, because it measures for expertise in the algo. Like it's gonna give you the best if you want it.
But
And so-
YouTube can allow that to happen organically, or it can try and meddle with it. But the more it try and meddles with it, the more it weakens itself.
Yeah.
The better it allows that to be an organic bottom-up process without doing too much top-down meddling, the better YouTube is.
That's what I'm talking about. There are controls of something they don't want to get X too big, but if they do allow things to come up through that are quality, that have a quality to them.
Which is why my channel is so small.
Well, I know you've colonized Grail country pretty hard.
But it's growing.
Well, this is I'm always asking Nate and trying to keep up. I'm just like, do you want me to be doing these on your channel? Because I don't know. I mean, it's probably why it's gotten as big as it has, but I don't know. I'm always what's funny about the whole internet thing is it's constantly flipping my own narrative, because like I started out somewhat of a Luddite, and then I got onto Twitter and then eventually YouTube for I don't know, adult conversations and things, this kind of engagement. And then I'm like all of a sudden, well, I don't know, this seems like a real communion. Like I like a lot of these people. I've developed a relationship with these people. Well, that goes against my narrative. And then scale, I don't know. Like I try to be open to scale, but like I'm doubtful of it. I'm doubtful of extrapolate. I think it's a limitation of our own finitude and our embodiedness. You can't pay attention to everything and to 500 people. I mean, not meaningfully.
But think about how Christianity deals with the Dunbar number and always has. Jesus has Peter, James, and John.
Yeah.
And then he has the 12 disciples, and then he has the 72, and then he has
pyramid.
the 120, and the church in Corinth, and the church, and then there are multiple churches in Corinth. And I mean, and so now, and you have the house church and discipleship and the small group and the cat-sized church and the mega church and the book and the denomination. I mean, we are working on this again. And that's why, Luke, let's give props to Jacob, who came up with the just chatting. Jacob did that. And we're continuing to work on this. But the expert thing, the expert thing is having a real hard time because of the Dunbar number thing, because experts are in the eye of the beholder, which again is personal.
Oh, snap.
Well, once upon a time, institutions were able to help with the scaling of credentialism and credibility and expertise to get beyond the Dunbar number, and that has a huge amount of there's a lot of upside on that, Luke, that I think you're discounting. The problem is that those institutions used to operate with a lot more good faith from the people participating in them than I think that they have now. And they're trying to be gamed by people, which weakens them. And it's not like an MD is still probably better than not an MD, but I had a decent sized argument with my wife yesterday about some medical advice that was given to our children at the urgent care, and I thought differently and my wife thought differently, and so now all of a sudden we're sending each other scientific studies.
Right.
And it's like, well,
because that will flip, is which experts and trainees do you trust, and is the medical establishment actually making people healthier?
Yeah.
That wasn't the spirit of what Grog was saying initially. And I feel like this conversation is like getting more and more disingenuous, like away from the fact that I think you would all agree with, which is in every aspect of our lives, we rely on experts. We rely on credentials to reliably display someone's competency or authority. And I think the point he was making was that everyone in this stream right now does this, except for the Christians when it comes to other Christians. Is that as long as this Christian guy, whether his name is Jonathan Pajot, whether he has 0 subscribers or 1,000 subscribers, whatever, as long as he's saying things that I like, he's correct. But like, very rarely do you ever see somebody come forward and go, actually,
it's not just that you like what he's saying. I think it's that you find it interesting and compelling and capturing and deserving of your attention. I think that's deeper than that you like it. Or you find it false and you get angry about it, but that still keeps you watching. It can be more complex than just that.
But 2 weeks to flatten the curve. If you get this injection, you won't get COVID. There have been this thing has been under. Just read Thomas Kuhn's The History of Scientific Revolutions. That was the peak. Science is going to deliver us from the tyranny of personal preference. And what Thomas Kuhn notes in The History of Scientific Revolutions is that science itself is communal.
Mm-hmm.
There's no getting away from the personal.
And there's rituals.
Not only that, as a nurse, I work with heart surgeons every week. Every week I work with the best in the state. You know where I would send my dad to get his heart surgery if he has coronary artery disease? I would send him wherever I'm at. Wherever that surgeon has to look at me. I don't care how fucking good his credentialing are, as if he is in the top. If he's rated by whatever institution as the best surgeon in the world, I would send him to wherever I'm at, and that surgeon has to look at me.
Yep.
And that's what Pajot talks about in his art conference. I put this in my last video. He says the world doesn't want to maybe admit that maybe we're built on more than just things, but that it might be built on things like care as a human. And that care is a real thing. And it might be considered imaginary by like T-Grog. But I don't see it as imaginary when I take care of people physically as a vocation. And knowing inside myself and the moral quandaries that I feel inside myself of what does it mean to care for this patient? Am I a caring person today? And so I think that's the tension between credentialism and what Paul was just hitting on, which is the personal.
And accountability. That's another part of what you're talking about is like that doctor is going to be accountable to you and or a community if they mess up. And that's another difficulty with scale is when, it's not that there isn't accountability, suing someone for medical malpractice is a institutionalized procedural form of accountability, but it's different and has weaknesses that losing status in your own community if you do wrong by someone.
And Jordan Hall found that in a town of 8,000 people. He doesn't maybe even know about what he walked into is a community of care and trust.
He doesn't. He has no idea what he stepped into.
It's probably true.
I'm just saying that's the reality, that the scale that we are living in. When we say the word city is a megatropolis. And that scale is too big for care. You're a number, you're a sale.
Right. But every city is also a personal network. And that's why for all of the, I watch this with my kids trying to get into, a profession. And, everybody's sending out these resumes and LinkedIn. And there's some value to that. But I'll tell you, you know how to find a job? So Jared, my one son who's really in the corner, had a degree in engineering. He was lifeguarding at the pool. One of the lifeguards under him says, my dad's an engineer and he's looking for engineers. Didn't you say you have an engineering degree? Yeah. Bang.
Works.
That's how he got a job. And that's how he got in. Now you can show incompetence. So see, there's the difficulty with modernity in almost every system is the monarchical, in that there's always a hierarchy. But if you don't pay attention to the lower members of the hierarchy, you're not understanding what a hierarchy is. And so credentials are important. All of those things are important, but they're never alone.
All right, let's let Neil talk, and then I want to see if Tim, are we mischaracterizing what you're trying to say?
I'm going to go shower, but I'm going to keep listening.
Okay.
Keep the webcam on, Paul.
You don't want to see that.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of use the Orthodox Church as like my framework for explaining how I feel about experts. So I think a very key thing is that experts are servants. They serve us. That's what they're doing, is they're going up and like Moses getting the wisdom and coming down and bringing it to us. And you can see this in ordination is the image that I'm going to use, where in the Orthodox Church, you have three people who had to confirm that you are ordained. You have the bishop who's does the actual laying on of the hands and you become a priest or a deacon. And then you have the priest who is your confessor, who knows you very personally. And then you have your congregation that you're a member of. So you don't just the bishop, you could say as a credentialing, the official, you have your credential, and then your confessor priest would be, whoever hires you. But this is what's going on in the corner more than anything else is the congregation, where we're mostly peers, and we're all yes, we agree. Just go send him to talk to, and that's we're all kind of, I think the whole TLC project is making deacons, the people who serve their congregation, because they, you know, they've.
Well, who are our bishops?
Paul is the bishop.
Yeah.
And I think that it holds. And like, you know, whoever's phone number you get and you call could be your priest. And then, but like in your real life is the congregation, and they'll confirm whether or not you have some wisdom to offer them. But I think that's what's going on, is like we're not too big on credentials, because the service that we're providing in the end is not something that needs a credential. It's about being a person to somebody else. Like we're exiting lurkerdom in our own life. Like that's the whole point. That's one of the points. What is the point? So that's what I got. I'm gonna just start saying random things at the end of this.
No, you're good. Thank you. I don't know what CW means here. Maybe we aren't proselytizing in the corner, but we sure are fond of our polemics when it comes to just chatting with intellectual opponents. Did you think that was polemical? Talking with T-Girl?
I think what he means is that we're fond of making our own opinions known, even if we're not necessarily as eager to get people into our box. And he might be right.
Yeah, I mean, that's somewhat, to me, that's the that's the learned skill that I think we're also evolving and learning in this little corner, with the balance between masculine and feminine energies and conversations. You should discern when to talk, and you should discern when to shut up or ask questions, you know,
And
which some are better at.
And anybody that's hopping on too, there's a piece of that within themselves, even if they're new. You know, they have to believe in what they're saying.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to CW's conversation with what's
Nathan,
the annoying
Nathan Ormond. It's actually really good. It endeared me to Nathan. It actually made me think, because I was falsely judging him and avataring him a little bit, where I was putting him into categories. Like I was, and I was thinking he's kind of like this, but it made me think that he's actually a lot more. It personified him to me. It opened him up to me, where it made me think, like,
tell
maybe
me
I'm
about
wrong.
his person. What did you learn about Nathan O?
I think he's a lot more. I think he's a lot more open and honest, and like a real truth seeker in the broad sense of it, than someone who's just kind of a. I mean, we would have temperamental and preferential differences for sure. He and I would, and like we'd probably struggle talking to each other very well until we got to know each other a lot better. But I don't see him as just like a kind of angry Protestant Rage Against the Machine kind of anti-religion person. He has a complicated relationship with it, and also, like a lot of people have said, he's still young, but he thinks about these things well, because he recognizes somewhat a little the condescending remarks of like, oh, you're young, we'll just give you time, in 20 years, and you'll be where I am or something. Like,
No young person ever likes hearing that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, and it's not necessarily right either. I mean, Wisdom is a benefit of the aged if they have become wise.
Or the young if they've become wise.
True. Very true, Paul and Timothy stuff. So
hey, thanks for the hang.
Yeah.
Got to get going. Bye.
Yeah, I'm probably going to wrap this up too. What do we have? Anybody else have some thoughts? I'll look at some things here.
I've been reading Michael Servetus to try and get ready to do some stuff on him. And he had a book that I was reading that he wrote, and that he was arguing with Melanchthon. I always forget that reformer's name. It was like Luther's right-hand man, Melanchthon or something like that.
Quick aside, pause.
Yes.
A local buddy who says, he's so funny, I'm trying to remember his name too, but he remade his own, he does all these what do you like parodies? They're not parodies, but like free use things. So like he wrote a rap like Hamilton about this guy that you're mentioning right now.
Melanchthon. Philip Melanch. How do you pronounce Nchth?
I should be able to say it right now and remember it because he just freestyle rapped this like 2-minute thing about Jacob Melanchthon, whatever, and it was awesome. Anyhow, keep going. Sorry.
So I'm reading this book by Serveus, and then I look, and he wrote it when he was 19. I'm like,
yeah,
what? I'm like, no wonder he kind of sounds a little angry or a little immature. I mean, he's like the angry 19-year-old in the comments section who's picking a beef with the big guy and like is, coming out swinging. And I'm like, man, 19-year-olds just aren't what they used to be. Melanchthon.
Yeah, except Julian. Shout out Julian. That boy was balling at 19.
Yeah, he was.
Jacob, what up?
I just wanted to say, when you talk about credentials, you have to define what credentials are.
But who does that? What credentials do you have to define the who?
You got to be the right credentials to define.
That's a circular reference problem.
Not really. It comes from credo, right? Believing. And after getting to know Sam, I know he knows about the Trinity. I know he knows about X, Y, and Z. And what's most important to me is I know Sam is willing to say he doesn't know when he doesn't know. And so, I'm not talking necessarily about having an MD or whatever, because, we've stopped believing in our institutions, and that's a problem. But trusting other people to actually know things for us, we have to do that. You cannot function if you don't trust other people to know things for you.
And I think Luke does trust other people to know things for him, but they have to be people. Luke's really into it being people that he knows, that personalistly.
I love Luke, but Luke says a lot of things that don't match necessarily with reality, including about how he lives his own life.
Well, he's a particle wave field, so it's a different plane of existence that he's.
What? I say a lot of things that don't match my own life.
Correct.
Meaning.
So, if I remember correctly, so just as an example, if I remember correctly, you're very big on knowing where your food comes from.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you ever go to a farmer's market and do you ever go and look for organic foods? You're
like, he buys cows from people he knows and stuff.
I know he goes, and that's a beautiful thing. But ultimately, I don't see how you can maintain a specific diet without, for example, paying attention to the USDA and what certified organic is, or like who says what organic is and what organic isn't, right?
It's Joel Salatin. Everything I want to do is illegal. Yeah, he talks about all that stuff.
It's
all bullshit.
It goes when you live your life, like we all.
You can have aspirational morality goals that you don't fully live up to,
of course,
without being a complete hypocrite.
Okay, the greatest moments. So one of the greatest accomplishments I've had in life so far was being memed by Chris Pacal. Did you see the video he made of Jacob of propaganda? Chris Pacal's propaganda video? Oh, this is the best video in the world. Let me see if I can find it quickly.
That's a hilarious comment, Flavis.
Chris, where's the video? Where is that? If somebody can find, oh, there it is. Found it. Here. Please put this up on screen.
Okay, what? You put you on screen?
No,
Oh, down here. Got it. Yep.
Okay.
Propaganda with persuasion and communication, how human beings make decisions, how human beings are influenced by each other to have technological progress in rhetoric. That's what has happened. New psychotechnologies, too many people think they understand human communication. They don't. I hope it's clear to you that the helicopter on the left would never fly. Helicopter on the right would also never fly. These are just scaled down models. We're talking about technology here, and technology has progressed. Mass circulation of books, mass circulation of newspapers, and that allowed for advertising, and then more ways of communication like radio, television, and now internet came into being. Edward Bernays came up with the idea of public relations. Bernays realized in consulting with psychologists, his uncle was Sigmund Freud, and he realized that there is a sexual element and that cigarettes can be marketed to women as something that is both sexy and that is liberating. It is an incredibly idiotic thing to tell someone to think for themselves. Secure our distributed cognition through awareness, transparency, and accountability. I did not do saving throws, although I probably should have. Propaganda.
What's a savings throw? I've never played Dungeons and Dragons.
Propaganda. This is a nuclear bomb going on. Propaganda. You cannot think for yourself. Think for yourself. Think for yourself. Anyone who tells you to think for yourself is your enemy. You should not think for yourself. Our understanding of ourselves and our world is not
let's pause this.
You have the powers.
Yeah, let's if people want to go check out the fullness of that, they can, I suppose. So the main point being,
you cannot think for yourself.
I mean, no man is an island. I guess I agree.
Distributed cognition is a thing. You cannot think for yourself. And if you want to do it well, you want to recognize that you're distributing your cognition to other people and do it in a transparent and ethical and thoughtful way.
I guess I would probably say that I think your awareness is rooted in love because your salience is rooted in love. And so like, even if you think you're distributing things and paying attention to all this stuff, it's all nested in what you love, which is deeper than cognition.
That's really cute, but like the fact is, when I think, hey, you know what, if I'm gonna think about the Trinity, I'm going to ask Sam. Or frankly, there's a lot of things I specifically think about, I'm going to talk to Sam about if this
but look, everyone says I'm an expert on the Trinity, but no one listens to me. Like, if everyone listened to me as the expert on the Trinity, no one would believe in the Trinity anymore. Take it from the experts, all you Trinitarians out there, you're wrong. Okay, but yeah, that doesn't have any effect on the people.
Okay, so that's the difference between authority and authoritarianism. Authority means I listen to you. It doesn't mean I obey you.
Yeah, there's a voluntary, we spoke about that earlier. Nate said that. That's the difference between power and authority. Authority is reciprocal. It's relational.
Okay,
It's
so for all of the
acknowledged.
love you have for me, stop believing in the Trinity.
Well, that's the thing, Sam. Like, and that's why the idea of love getting in there, it doesn't make sense, because I try to love everyone, even if they're idiots.
But I'm saying you love things. Your love is deeper than what you're also consciously aware of. I just said that. It's deeper than your cognition. It's deeper
Okay,
than your
so
awareness.
why are you bringing it in at all? What's the point?
Because, like,
I think, look, Jacob and Luke, you guys are agreeing way more than you're acting like it. You both, like, Luke does not think that he has to do all his thinking for himself. He thinks that he needs to find people he can trust. Luke and Jacob say, well, you need to find people who you trust to help do your thinking for you. I don't see what you guys are even really actually disagreeing about.
Teo, I don't just love you, I even like you. And that's the surprising thing.
So I'm probably going to wrap this up. The main thing I'm just trying to say is this is maybe here. This is the promotion for the conversation I need to schedule with Chad, which will just be recorded in like a old style randos on the God of your own understanding, or the Bible of your own understanding, or the Trinity of your own understanding, or the whatever. I think the only kind of understanding, this is why I say all meaning is personal. It's not just, you don't think by yourself, but you do think with you. I guess that's what I would say. So any other words?
Who's the Grail Country in the comments on YouTube?
That's
Is
Nate.
that Nate?
Yeah.
So it's not you. Okay. I don't know.
No.
I
It is
thought it was
sometimes,
Nate, but I was
it is sometimes. If my thing comes up with it, then it is. And I don't know how that all works, but this has been Nate. Yeah. Lately.
Okay. I was a little confused for a second. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Nate talking at me, but yeah. All right. Nate. It's Nate. Got it. All right.
All right. Well, this was very good. Thanks for jumping on. We got to talk to T-Grog. It was great. It was fantastic. I enjoyed it. This was long for me, but it worked. So thanks, everybody. Peace out. Have a good one. Bye.